This isn't romance. It's protection.
So, was this really how it began? With a single gunshot tearing through the silk, champagne and laughter of Nichole Lawrence's 22nd birthday, with her father collapsing in blood right in front of her. 1 second, Nichole was Manhattan's little princess. Kane Lawrence's carefully protected daughter. The girl everyone thought was too delicate for the brutal world built around her. The next, nothing felt safe anymore. In the chaos of smoke and shattered glass, only one man seemed untouched by it. Tristan Oswald, her father's closest business partner. 37, controlled, lethal. The man Nichole had wanted for years, and the one man she may now have no choice but to trust. But some men don't enter your life like safety. They enter like the storm. And when a woman has to place her future in the hands of the most dangerous man she has ever wanted, is that salvation? Or the beginning of the fall? Nichole Lawrence had spent an hour telling herself she was not getting dressed for Tristan Oswald. That lie held until the helicopter blades started beating against the Hamptons sky. She stood in front of the mirror in the second-floor suite of the Lawrence summer estate and looked at the girl everyone thought they knew. Petite, 5'5" on a generous day, honey-brown hair falling in soft waves over one bare shoulder, freckles dusted across her nose and cheeks, dark green eyes that looked softer than they really were. Her black silk dress skimmed her slim, shapely body and made her look older than 22. Not Kane Lawrence's little princess. Not tonight. Tonight was her 22nd birthday party, and for the first time in years, Nichole wanted one man and one man only to look at her and stop seeing a child. The door swung open without a knock. Naomi Lawrence leaned against the frame in a pale designer gown, one manicured hand lifting toward the ceiling. Her smile was the same one she wore at charity galas in old money dining rooms, and whenever she wanted to cut someone without leaving blood on the floor. Naomi had been Nichole's stepmother for long enough to know exactly where to push. "Helicopter, darling." She delivered the words with the warmth of a woman who had never needed to raise them, soft enough to cut clean. "Your father is here. Have you finally grown tired of admiring yourself, or should we ask the guests to wait while you finish falling in love with your reflection?" Nichole turned slowly. "You should go downstairs, Naomi. I'd hate for anyone to think this house came without a hostess." Naomi's smile sharpened. "Still touchy. 22 suits you less than I hoped. Try not to embarrass yourself tonight. You know how much your father hates scenes." Then she was gone, perfume lingering behind her like a warning. Nichole blew out a breath and looked past the balcony doors toward the black sheet of ocean beyond the lawns. Her stomach tightened. That old cold pull she never quite shook. She never swam, never stepped into the pool, never let anyone coax her onto a boat after dark. When she'd been 11, Kane's enemies had taken her, and the night had ended with freezing water closing over her head and Tristan dragging her back out. Ever since, the sight of deep water lived somewhere beneath her ribs, quiet and permanent. She pushed it down. Not tonight. She was already halfway down the staircase when Sam Sutton stepped into her path. Sam, Naomi's 26-year-old son, technically Nichole's stepbrother, had blue eyes, a careless dimple, and polished good looks that made women forgive him too quickly. Nichole never had. There was a calculating patience beneath his charm, hunger under the easy smile, the restlessness of someone always waiting for things to fall his way. During the summers, he moved through the Lawrence estate as if he'd built it himself. He caught her lightly by the wrist. "Where are you running, birthday girl?" Nichole looked down at his hand until he let go. "To greet my father." Sam's mouth curved. "Your father." A pause, deliberate and amused. "Or Tristan." She kept walking. Her neck felt warm. By the time she reached the front terrace, the helicopter had settled on the lawn. Kane Lawrence stepped out first, broad-shouldered, silver at the temples, the kind of man who made rooms rearrange themselves around him without ever asking them to. He smiled the moment he saw her. "There's my girl." She stepped into his arms the moment she saw him. Her pulse was already faster, and it had nothing to do with Kane. Tristan Oswald stepped down behind him. 37. Kane's business partner, Kane's closest friend. The man who handled the parts of the Lawrence empire no one described too clearly in daylight. He moved with the hard control of someone who had spent years inside danger and never fully left it. Tall, broad through the shoulders, lean in a way that came from discipline, not vanity. Dark hair, a little too long, falling across his forehead. A white shirt open at the throat under a dark suit jacket. Grey eyes that looked cold until they locked on something. And then they looked like they were deciding. His face made people stare first because he was beautiful, and then keep staring because something about him felt unsafe. For 1 second his eyes landed on her. "Happy birthday, Nick." There it was, the name she hated. Nichole stepped back from her father and crossed to Tristan anyway, because dignity had never stood much chance when it came to him. She rose onto her toes and brushed a quick kiss against his cheek. Up close he smelled like dark cologne and something warmer underneath. Soap, maybe, or just the particular heat of his skin. She pulled back before her lungs could make it worse. "I don't know anyone named Nick." She let the last word come out low and deliberate. "My name is Nichole." A faint smile touched one corner of his mouth. It changed his whole face and revealed the dimple in one cheek that almost no one ever saw. "For me, you'll always be Nick, sweetheart." Then he patted her upper back with infuriating ease, as if she were still 11 and trailing after him through hallways. Nichole could have strangled him. "Still alone, Tristan?" The question came out lighter than she felt. Kane barked out a laugh before Tristan could answer. "He's always alone, princess. Your Tristan doesn't know how to keep a woman longer than a night." She should not have liked the sound of it nearly as much as she did. "My Tristan." Kane slapped Tristan's shoulder. "One day, try keeping a woman somewhere other than your bed. I'd like to see you as a husband and father before I die." The corner of Tristan's mouth lifted, dry, unhurried. "Then stay alive another 50 years, Kane." The men laughed. Nichole smiled with them. Over the rim of her champagne flute, she watched Tristan's profile against the terrace lights and let the thought move through her quietly, as it always did. One day, Kane leaned close to Tristan's ear, lowering his voice to something Nichole couldn't catch. "Security?" She was watching Tristan's profile the way she always did, the set of his jaw, the stillness of him, when he answered. No phone check, no hesitation. His eyes stayed on the waterline as he spoke, low and even. 8 at the front, 4 on the water. 2 rotating the east edge. Patrol rotation in 9 minutes. There's a gap on the waterline while they reset. 9 minutes. She didn't know why she filed it away. She just did. "Move the men off the beach." Kane lowered his drink. "Naomi thinks visible security ruins the mood. Put them closer to the drive." Tristan's eyes moved to the waterline, then back. "You sure? This is my daughter's birthday party. Not a war zone." Kane took a drink. "No one needs to feel watched." Tristan looked at the water once more. "All right." She felt eyes on her and turned. Sam was leaning against a stone column with a glass in his hand, watching her adjust the neckline of her dress. He lifted his drink in a private little toast. She looked away first and looped her arm through Kane's. "My cake still isn't here. If you forgot my birthday cake, I will ruin you in front of your guests." Kane laughed. "Your cake is coming." Tristan chose it himself. Her chest lifted before she could help it. Kane kissed her temple. "Small princess became a queen and still thinks I forgot her cake." Uncle Tristan personally made sure it was right. "Dad," she groaned, "stop calling him Uncle Tristan. I am not 5. You'll always be my baby." He kissed her temple again and moved toward the next arriving guests. A woman in a pale, body-skimming dress cut across the terrace toward them, drawing glances the way fire draws air. Jane Curtis, Kane's assistant, never entered a room quietly because she had no interest in being overlooked. Everything about her was polished, expensive, and a little too intentional. "Nichole," Jane's smile was warm enough to be insulting. "You look beautiful." Jane, Nichole held her gaze. You look ready to steal attention from a bride? Jane's laugh was light and practiced. Her fingers found Tristan's sleeve as she turned back toward him, easy, proprietary, as if Nichole had already stopped being interesting. At your age, attention is easy, darling. The trick is keeping it once you have it. Tristan lifted his glass and scanned the terrace. His silence landed like a verdict on everyone present. Then, mercifully, Eva arrived. Eva had been Nichole's best friend since they were 8, back when both families had summers in the same part of the Hamptons, and Eva had been the first person stubborn enough to love Nichole without fearing the Lawrence name. She was quick, warm, funny, and dangerous in the way only people with no real respect for social rank could be. There you are, Eva kissed her cheek. I leave you alone with your stepmother and the Southampton reptiles for 10 minutes, and somehow you're still alive. A miracle. Nichole almost laughed. You're late. I know, forgive me. I had to decide which dress said loyal best friend and which said witness at the murder trial to follow if Naomi opens her mouth again. Even Tristan's mouth twitched. Jane's fingers were still on Tristan's sleeve. Nichole looked away first. Eva caught it, all of it, in about half a second. Oh no, her voice dropped. It's that bad? Worse, Nichole murmured. Eva looked her over, slow and appreciative. Okay, you look absolutely insane tonight. That dress, she shook her head, specifically designed to ruin a man who thinks he's immune. Before Eva could say anything else, Sam joined them. His eyes moved over Nichole with the particular leisure of someone who thought looking was the same as having. I agree with her, actually. You look incredible tonight. Nichole kept her glass at her lips. Do you follow women professionally, Sam, or does it come naturally? Eva raised her glass without looking at him. Gifted, clearly. The small cluster had barely settled when Sam stepped closer and let his hand slide low against Nichole's bare waist. Every muscle in her body went still. Then across the music. Sam. Tristan hadn't raised it. He hadn't needed to. He looked first at Sam's hand, then at Sam's face, and said nothing else. And somehow that landed harder than anything could have. Sam lifted both palms. Of course. Didn't mean to upset your birthday, girl. Tristan's eyes moved to Sam's face and stayed there. Keep your hands to yourself, and your mouth. No one spoke. Nichole kept her eyes on her champagne and breathed. A server passed with fresh glasses. Music floated over the lawn. Nichole leaned into Eva. Tell me I'm not losing my mind. You need someone your own age, Nichole. Eva's eyes moved to Tristan across the terrace. He's 37, controlling, and yes, fine, objectively attractive, but boring, I think. Nichole looked at her. He's not boring. See, that's the problem. A security guard crossed the terrace and murmured in Tristan's ear. She saw the shift before she understood it. His posture changed. Subtle, total, like a current reversing direction beneath still water. Whatever ease had lived on his face was gone. How did they miss the address? His phone was already at his ear, the words clipped and low. The Lawrence estate is the one glowing at the end of the road. Fine, I'm coming. He looked at Kane. Cake delivery at the gate. Wrong driver. Wrong credentials. Kane's expression closed. Handle it. Tristan was already moving. Nichole took one step after him. You're leaving? He stopped and looked at her properly this time. Not through her. Not past her. At her. 2 minutes, Nick. Then quieter, as if he knew exactly how badly that look could ruin her. Try not to start a war without me. He turned and walked toward the front drive, one hand in his pocket, the other loose at his side. Jane watched him go. Nichole noticed and resented her for it. The wind shifted. Salt came high over the bluff. Somewhere beyond the terrace, the Atlantic moved in the dark like a breathing thing. Nichole kept her back to the water, kept her eyes on the front drive where Tristan had disappeared, kept breathing. Eva nudged her. Your pulse is in your throat. Nichole kept her eyes forward. I know. Eva glanced sideways at her. Maybe tomorrow you try talking to someone your own age at the beach party. Just for research. Every guy our age feels about 12. Her gaze stayed on the space where Tristan had disappeared. No one felt like him. That was the problem, and she had long since stopped pretending otherwise. She was still watching the dark where he'd disappeared. The gunshot cracked through the night like something breaking that wasn't meant to bend. Not far. Close enough that the sound hit her chest before her mind caught up with what it was. Then a second shot cracked across the terrace. A woman screamed. Glass shattered somewhere to Nichole's left. Guests dropped. Someone shouted for the security team. Nichole turned toward the beach and saw them. 3 masked men coming up from the dark edge of the property, guns raised, moving fast, from the waterline, from the unguarded waterline. Everything after that happened in splinters. Kane shoved her backward. "Get down!" A bullet hit him before the order fully left his mouth. She saw the impact before she understood it. Her father staggered. Another shot cracked. Sam lunged forward and went down, clutching his leg, shouting. Behind her, Eva screamed her name and tried to drag her toward the stone columns. Nichole barely felt it. The ocean, the dark, the gunfire. The old freezing panic surged up all at once so violently that her lungs locked. And then she was already moving, running toward her father without deciding to, heels catching on the stone. "Nichole, don't—" Eva's voice, behind her. She didn't stop. Kane was still on his feet, but barely, one hand pressed to his chest, the other reaching for nothing. She was almost there, 3 steps, 2. Something made her turn. One of the gunmen had swung his weapon away from the crowd, directly at her. She stopped. Her body just stopped. The barrel was close enough that she could see the dark circle of it and nothing else. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't move. She stared down the barrel and thought, with terrible clarity, "This is it." Then another shot exploded from behind her. The gunman dropped. Tristan was running back across the terrace, not as Kane's partner, not as the man who ran boardrooms, as the other version of him, the one no one talked about in daylight. He fired again while moving and called toward the south side of the lawn, "Take the waterline, now!" 4 security men broke after the retreating shooters without a word, without looking at Kane. They looked at Tristan. Nichole was already on her knees beside her father. She didn't know when she'd crossed the terrace. Her hands were pressed to his chest, blood coming through her fingers, warm and fast, and she could hear herself saying something, his name, maybe, or nothing coherent at all. She pressed harder, her voice breaking apart. "Dad, look at me! Look at me!" A hand closed around her arm. Tristan crouched beside her, his eyes moving over Kane once, fast, clinical, and then he looked at her. "Get inside." The words came out low and hard, with no room in them for anything else. He was already pulling her up. "Now, Nick." "I'm not leaving him." Her voice came out shaking, barely her own. Tristan's hand tightened on her arm. "I said now." Words hard enough to cut through everything. She looked down at her hands, red to the wrist. The terrace lights smeared. The sound rushed away. Tristan caught her before she hit the ground. His arm closed around her waist. His other hand came up behind her head. Everything smelled like gunpowder, salt, and the dark warmth of his skin against her cheek. "I'm here," low and hard against her ear. "Stay with me." The last thing she saw before the dark took her was Tristan Oswald kneeling in the middle of her ruined birthday party. Gun in one hand, her father bleeding at his side, murder in his eyes. When Nichole came back, she was sitting on the ground, her back against the wall, the cold of the stone coming through the silk. She didn't know how she'd gotten there. Tristan was crouched in front of her, one knee on the ground, his eyes level with hers, watching her with the particular stillness he reserved for things that required his full attention. "There you are." Low and quiet, close enough that only she could hear it. She heard herself make a sound that wasn't quite an answer. Tears were tracking down her face. She hadn't decided to cry. She was aware of them only because the terrace lights kept blurring and wouldn't unblur, and her cheeks felt cold where the air moved over them. Beyond Tristan's shoulder, the ambulances were burning across the lawn, blue, then white, then blue again, until the whole birthday party looked like something underwater and unreal. Her father lay on the stone 3 yards away with paramedics around him. She held on to that. He was alive. She tried to stand. Tristan's hand came to her elbow before she'd
isn't
fully made the
romance.
decision. I need to get
It's
to him.
protection.
His grip tightened enough to stop her. Blood had dried at the cuff of his white shirt. Up close, she could smell gunpowder on him under the salt air. You need to stay where I can reach you. Those words landed somewhere lower than anger could touch, in the place the gunfire had blown open and not closed again. Tristan looked like a man whose mind had already split the night into problems and routes and names. Beyond him, Sam was being loaded onto a stretcher, his face white, one hand clamped to his thigh. A graze, from what she could see, not deep. Naomi kept pace beside the medics in her pale gown, fingers wrapped tight around Sam's wrist as if she could hold him in place by force alone. She was speaking to him in measured, too even tones for the amount of blood soaking through the bandage. Jane was closer to the house, one hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaking clean lines through her makeup. When her eyes found Nichole, she came toward her in a rush that sent her dress swaying around her ankles. Oh God, Nichole! Kane! She folded Nichole into a quick, shaking embrace. It smelled of champagne and perfume and panic. Tristan stepped in almost at once, not touching Jane, only turning his body enough to break the contact. That's enough. Jane drew back, startled into stillness. Her voice cracked. I can't believe this happened. Nichole could. That was the worst part. Danger itself had always felt closer here than it was supposed to. The house was too beautiful, the money too old, the people around her too practiced at pretending they lived clean lives. By the time the paramedics had moved Kane further down the terrace, Nichole was on her feet. She didn't remember standing, close enough to the steps to catch most of it. A sheriff's deputy, young, still working out where to put his nerves, had stopped beside the senior officer and dropped his chin toward Tristan. That him? The sheriff kept his eyes on Tristan's back. He didn't bother keeping it down much. Yeah. The deputy watched Tristan direct two of his men toward the waterline. When he spoke again, the words came low enough to barely carry. You saying Mafia? The sheriff's jaw shifted once. I'm saying men like that don't wait for permission. Nichole filed that away alongside the 9 minutes. Hearing it spoken aloud, under ambulance lights, while Kane bled 3 yards away, made the knowledge sit differently in her chest. She watched Tristan work, already 3 steps ahead of every official on the property, and felt the edges of him sharpen into something she had always half known and never let herself look at directly. Her chest tightened around the thought and didn't loosen. Tristan let go of her only long enough to take a phone from his pocket. His voice dropped, low and clipped, every word built to travel and obey. I want every feed from the gate, the drive, the beach, and the east wall pulled now. Lock the road down. No one leaves until my team has plates, faces, and times. Start with the cake delivery. I want the real driver found before the police finish taping off the lawn. He listened, his eyes fixed on the dark water below the bluff. No mistakes tonight. When he ended the call, the ambulance doors were closing over Kane. The sound reached her before she understood it. That particular metal finality, solid and absolute. A pull settled low in her chest and stayed there. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth. She didn't make a sound. She just stood very still and breathed through it, slowly, until her vision stopped moving. The sheriff came to him before they left. Whatever passed between them took less than a minute. After that, no one stopped them at the gate. She was sitting in the back of the SUV when she noticed the tremor still in her fingers. Faint now, barely there. Tristan sat beside her. His phone kept lighting up. Each time it did, he answered in a word or two and put another part of the night into motion. At the hospital, white replaced everything. Kane disappeared through the trauma doors before she could do more than catch a last glimpse of his hand against the sheet. Naomi arrived from Sam's room 15 minutes later, lipstick gone, everything else back in place. Nichole could hear her from across the waiting room before she even reached them. Sam's name, the word superficial, just a graze, all of it delivered in the same measured register she used at board meetings. The first attorney leaned in, then the second. Then the family doctor came hurrying through the door with his tie askew, and Naomi's composure didn't shift once. Jane sat at the far end of the room with a tissue crushed in one fist, crying quietly now, no longer dramatic, just spent. Kane's name left her lips once, barely above a breath, as if sound alone could reach him behind those doors. Nichole did not go to her. Tristan was standing by the windows with the sheriff and one of his own men, looking over a phone screen, camera angles probably, a timestamp, the gate, the cake van. She should have looked away. Instead, she kept watching the hard set of his shoulders beneath the ruined shirt and thought, "Who are you, really?" The surgeon came out just before 2 in the morning. Kane had survived surgery. The bullet had missed his heart, but the blood loss had been severe, swelling around the wound, risk of infection, pressure on the lungs. They would know more by morning. "He's in a coma," the surgeon said. She heard it. She understood each word individually, cleanly. But they reached her like a sound heard from underwater, passing through her before they could land. Then they landed. Her knees went first. She found the chair before she hit the floor, barely, Eva's hand at her elbow steadying the last few inches down. Eva pressed a water bottle into her hands. Nichole held it against her sternum without drinking. The room changed after that, quietly, without drama, as if everyone in it understood at once that this was no longer one terrible night, but the beginning of whatever came next. Tristan came to stand over her a little later, the words landing before she'd registered he was beside her. "We're going home." She started to rise. "I'm not leaving him here." "You're not helping him here either." He kept his tone even, but the iron underneath it was audible now. "The doctors are working. The police are working. My people are working. You need a locked door and a room that isn't full of this." Her mouth opened. Then she saw Naomi cross the waiting area with the attorney, heads bent together, and the words died before they came. She rose without agreeing. Tristan took that for what it was and led her out. The Lawrence house looked untouched when they got back. The flowers still stood in the foyer. The lamps still glowed. Nichole had just sat down in the blue sitting room with Eva when Naomi appeared in the doorway carrying a slim leather folder. Kane's attorney, not the one who had been at the hospital first, a different one, older and silver-haired, came in behind her and closed the door quietly. Nichole saw the folder and felt the last of the numbness leave her body. "What is that?" Naomi crossed to the coffee table and set it down with controlled care. "Temporary documents, medical authority, financial continuity, the usual protections when a principal is incapacitated." Nichole's chin came up. "My father is alive." Naomi opened the folder, revealing tabs, signatures, marked pages. "That is exactly why this must be handled properly." Eva leaned forward. "Maybe this can wait until morning." "It cannot." Naomi turned a page. "And it should certainly not wait until people with no legal standing decide to interfere." Nichole stared at the signature lines. Too many of them, appearing too fast, the ink too clean for the weight they carried. Her father had been unconscious for hours, not days. The hospital bracelets were barely dry, and Naomi had already arrived with a plan. She pushed the folder shut. "I'm not signing anything." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Miss Lawrence, these are precautionary." "No." She was already on her feet, and she heard her voice rise and didn't care. "My father is alive. He has not been declared dead, absent, or incompetent by anyone. I am not signing anything at 2 in the morning because my stepmother suddenly discovered a talent for urgency." Naomi's face did not fall apart. It drew inward, became finer, more precise. "You are tired and frightened, but this is exactly why adults handle these matters." Nichole felt the slap of that all the way down her spine. "Don't." Her voice came out low and careful. "Do that." Naomi waited. "Talk to me as if I'm a child in my own house while my father is fighting to breathe." The words kept coming, steady and cold now. "You don't get to turn this into paperwork before the sun comes up. You don't get to stand here with a lawyer and act like you're protecting us." The front door opened somewhere beyond the hall. Naomi heard it too. Her shoulders tightened a fraction. The lawyer glanced toward the doorway. Footsteps crossed the marble, unhurried and unmistakable. Tristan came into the room with another attorney beside him. Kane's real one, the man Nichole had seen only at board dinners and once, years ago, at her grandmother's funeral. Tristan took in the folder, the marked tabs, Naomi still standing over the table. His eyes moved to Nichole's once, steady, certain, and then he looked at Naomi. "No one signs a thing." Nichole felt Tristan before she looked up, The room tightened. Naomi stopped looking composed and started looking careful. Even the lawyer beside her seemed to shrink where he stood. Tristan crossed the room, opened the folder in front of her, turned one page, then another, and set it down. "She signs nothing tonight." Naomi's mouth curved. "I'm not taking anything from Nichole. Right now, I'm the senior adult in this family, and someone has to manage the funds while Kane is unconscious. She is still a young girl in the middle of a crisis." The words landed in Nichole's throat. Her fingers curled once, then stilled. Tristan's smile appeared slowly, cold enough to drain the warmth from the room. "Naomi, you're not protecting her rights. You're making them unusable and moving control under your name." The lawyer beside Naomi started to speak. Edward Holloway cut through him without effort. "Mrs. Lawrence is not attempting to transfer ownership. She is attempting to transfer management." Naomi turned to him. "Which is necessary. Kane is in a coma. The company needs continuity. Someone has to oversee the funds." Naomi's eyes moved to Tristan, something sharpening in them. "And why exactly should she trust you?" Nichole's pulse stumbled. Her eyes lifted to Tristan and stayed there. He was still wearing the white shirt, sleeves rolled once, dried blood still at one cuff, and the dim lamplight did nothing to soften him. Tristan's eyes settled on her, steady and cold. "Because Kane has always trusted me more than he ever trusted you, Naomi." Naomi recovered fast, her chin lifting. "That's convenient. I'm going to find out who ordered tonight." The words came low without heat, which made them worse. "And if it leads back to you, I won't just stop you." He held her there with his eyes. "I'll end you." The fire shifted in the grate. No one else moved. Then Naomi struck where she meant to. "Then let Nichole decide which one of us deserves her trust. The woman who helped raise her since she was 12, or her father's Mafia partner." The word hit her like a hand pressed flat to the chest. The sheriff's voice came back in a flash of white lights and wet pavement. "Men like that don't wait for permission." She was looking at proof of that right now. She looked at Tristan. He did not deny it. It wasn't the darkness that shook her. It was the fact that he didn't try to explain it away. Holloway stepped in before Naomi could use the silence any further. "If you marry Miss Lawrence, the law no longer treats you as a protected heir under family control. You become an independent married beneficiary, and that closes the legal path Mrs. Lawrence is trying to use." Nichole stared at him. Kane's lawyer, Holloway, kept going in the same calm tone. "Your stepmother cannot take what is yours outright. What she can do is place it under temporary administration while your father is incapacitated. That gives her management, access, timing, pressure. If you remain here, she has time. If you marry, she loses the root." Naomi let out a short laugh. "So this is the answer? Frighten her into a contract with him?" Holloway didn't turn his head. "No, it is the answer that keeps you from doing the same thing first." If Nichole stayed in this house, Naomi would come back tomorrow with another folder and another polished explanation, then the day after that, and the day after that. She would keep coming until grief, confusion, or exhaustion did the work for her. If Nichole left with Tristan, the structure changed. It sounded insane. It also sounded true. She was aware of him crossing toward her before she fully processed the movement. Each step deliberate, unhurried. He stopped close enough that she felt his heat before his hands reached her. His palm closed around her forearm, then slid lower until his fingers circled her wrist. Her pulse jumped under his thumb. He bent his head, his mouth near her ear. "I'm not leaving you in this house, Nick. Not until Kane wakes up. He'd want you with me, and if Naomi had anything to do with tonight, you could be next. I'm not taking that risk." He called her Nick, not Nichole. It hit her where it always did, somewhere she had no defense for. So did the hand around her wrist, the certainty in it, the absence of any hesitation. His words came low, roughened by the length of the night, and she could smell cold air and cologne and the faint metallic trace still clinging to him. Her mouth had gone dry. Her heart was beating so hard she was sure Naomi could see it in her throat. She opened her eyes and found Naomi watching, then Holloway, then Tristan again. "You don't get to decide this for me." The protest came out softer than she wanted. His thumb shifted once against the inside of her wrist. "No, you decide whether your rights stay yours. I decide how fast I move once you do." Naomi cut in at once. Listen to him. He isn't asking for trust. He's asking for ownership. Tristan did not look away from Nichole. If I wanted ownership, Naomi, I wouldn't be standing here explaining the law. Only then did he look fully at her. This is not romance. It's not forever unless we decide otherwise. It is the fastest way to keep your name, your rights, and your future out of her hands. She had wanted more than that. The gap between what he'd offered and what she'd hoped for landed in her chest before she could prepare for it. And some part of her, the part that had loved him for years from the wrong side of a distance he had chosen to keep, had wanted more even now, even here, with Kane unconscious and Naomi a few feet away trying to rearrange her life. She hated that he saw it land. Hated more that his jaw tightened when it did, as if he felt it too. Still, he did not take the words back. He only tightened his hold and drew her one step closer. "We're leaving." Naomi straightened. "If you walk out of this house with him, don't expect to walk back in as if nothing has changed." Nichole looked at her stepmother and felt something inside her go still and cold and certain. "That makes two of us." Tristan turned her toward the door. His hand remained on her wrist, not rough, not gentle, just certain. The contact sent heat all the way up her arm. By the time they reached the foyer, his grip had shifted lower, fingers closing around the narrow bones above her hand as if he could feel the exact point where she might stop. She did stop. The hall opened in front of them in lamplight and shadow, the faint scent of birthday flowers still hanging in the air from a night that already felt as if it had happened to some other girl. Tristan slowed with her. He didn't let go. Her eyes moved once to Naomi behind them, then back to him. His face was all hard stillness, all control, but the pressure of his hand told the truth his expression refused to give away. Urgent, certain, unyielding. It steadied her. She didn't want to let it, but it did. Her lips parted. She caught herself biting the lower one before any question made it out. Tristan's eyes dropped there for a fraction of a second, then returned to hers. He said it the way he said everything that had already been decided. "We're getting married." Her breath caught on the words before she could stop it. She was afraid. She could feel that clearly in her hands, in her next breath coming unsteady. But underneath the fear, something had been waiting for this specific man to say exactly this specific thing for far longer than tonight. And still, with his hand around her wrist and his gaze holding hers, she could not make herself pull free. By the time the gates opened, Nichole felt the night in her bones. Tristan's Hamptons villa stood above the black water, smaller than the Lawrence estate, built with the same hard discipline as its owner. Glass, steel, clean lines, lit against the Atlantic like something designed to withstand impact rather than impress. She had seen it once from the road, always from a distance. Tonight the gates opened for her, and that thought moved through her before she could soften it. The front door opened before they reached it. A guard stepped back. Tristan moved past him without slowing, one hand settling briefly at the center of her back, guiding, not pushing. The contact disappeared in seconds. Her body held on to it anyway. Inside, the house was quieter than the Lawrence mansion, darker too. No portraits, no flowers, no soft lies dressed up as elegance. This place looked like Tristan, expensive, controlled, stripped of anything unnecessary. He stopped in the entry hall and turned to her. "Guest room upstairs, second door on the left." He had gone flat with exhaustion or discipline. With Tristan, the line between the two was always thin. "We do the ceremony here tomorrow. Holloway's handling the paperwork. Try to sleep." She stood watching him walk toward the far end of the house where several screens were already alive in the dark. One of his men waiting. Tristan was taking off his watch as he moved, rolling his sleeves higher, becoming more himself with every step away from the front door. The guest room was beautiful in the same severe way as the rest of the house, pale walls, dark wood, nothing soft but the sea beyond the windows. Somewhere below the bluff, a foghorn bled through the night. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She picked up before the second ring. "Tell me you're somewhere safe." Eva's voice was low, tight, with the kind of worry she usually hid behind humor. Tristan's villa. Gates, guards, cameras. Nichole sat on the edge of the bed and pulled her knees up, bare feet against the cool duvet. "I'm fine." A short silence on Eva's end. "You're marrying him tomorrow?" Nichole looked at the dark window. I know. A short silence. Then Ava, quieter. He took you out of a war zone, got the best doctors onto your father, and locked that place down like the world would have to go through him first. She paused. Arrangement or not? That's not nothing, Nichole. The sentence landed somewhere beneath her sternum and stayed there, warm and unwelcome at the same time. She pulled her knees closer to her chest. He said it isn't romance. He said a lot of things. Ava's exhale came slow and deliberate. Shower. Breathe. Try not to combust. The line went quiet. Nichole stayed on the edge of the bed without moving, phone still in her hand. Ava's words kept turning over. The world would have to go through him first. She listened to it for a long time before she moved. The upstairs hallway opened onto a floating staircase and a long view into the lower level, where Tristan had turned part of the villa into a command post without changing a single piece of furniture. Screens showed the Lawrence estate, the hospital entrance, the water line near the Hamptons property. She stopped at the top of the stairs, one hand on the railing, shoulder pressed to the wall. He was standing in front of the screens with his phone pressed to his ear, one hand braced on the back of a chair. She was watching him from above, the width of his shoulders, the taut line of his forearms beneath rolled sleeves, and she could feel the particular quality of his focus from here, even through glass and distance, complete, self-contained. The kind of attention that left no gaps for anything he hadn't already decided. No, the words carried cleanly through the quiet. I don't want another statement from him. I want him alive until I get there. He listened. Then, I'll question him myself. He ended the call, pointed once at the nearest screen, and spoke to his man without turning. Run facial again on the second one, left side. She kept watching. He was running everything at once. Her father's security, the attack, the paperwork, the investigation, and none of it showed on him as strain, only as precision. Her grip tightened on the railing. She went back upstairs before he could look up. The shower eased the cold out of her muscles. It did nothing for the restless heat under her skin. She stood in the guest bathroom in a towel, stared at the robe behind the door, then crossed the hall and slipped into Tristan's bedroom. His room smelled like him. Cedar, clean soap. Something darker underneath that was simply him. She found a charcoal sweatshirt folded on the shelf, pulled it over her head, and stood there a moment, with wet hair cooling down her neck and the soft weight of his clothes settling against her skin. The fabric held his scent. She was aware of that, with more of her body than she wanted to be. The hem barely covered the tops of her thighs. In the kitchen, Tristan was cooking. She stopped in the doorway. He was standing at the stove with his back to her, black lounge pants, a grey t-shirt that pulled across his shoulders every time he moved. One hand was working a skillet, just moving through his own kitchen the way he moved through everything, like he owned it and had already stopped thinking about that. The other hand reached for the wine without looking. Garlic, tomatoes, butter, and the mineral edge of the open bottle reached her before she'd taken another step. She was watching him and could feel the warmth of the room against her bare legs, and she stayed in the doorway a second longer than she meant to. He turned at the sound of her bare foot on the wood floor. His gaze moved from her face to the sweatshirt to her bare legs and back, and it didn't rush any of those stops. One corner of his mouth shifted. "It works." She came farther in. "You proposed to me as an emergency legal strategy and didn't even give me a chance to grab clothes." "You had other things to worry about." He turned back to the stove. "So did I." She stopped at the island, close enough now that the heat of the burners reached her. "You don't have a chef?" He kept his eyes on the skillet. "I know how to feed myself." She watched his hands move over the skillet, the knuckles, the easy control of the grip, and looked away before she could think too carefully about that. "Women don't stay here," she said, mostly to have something to say. "No." He didn't look at her. "They don't." She tilted her head. "How lucky for me." That made him glance at her again. A real one, not the careful kind he'd been rationing all night. The kind that held a fraction too long before he broke it and reached for the pasta with slightly more focus than it required. "You used to hate spice," he said. A smile pulled at her mouth. "I was 11. She dipped one finger into the red sauce, lifted it slowly to her lips, and kept her eyes on him. Tristan went very still. The skillet kept going. Everything else in him stopped. Then one eyebrow lifted controlled and unhurried. I assume that means you want wine too? She licked the sauce from her finger. If you have Cabernet Sauvignon. His hand paused on the stem of the glass for just a moment before he poured. Kiddo, you should be in bed. She felt the word land and settle wrong. Too young, too easy, too deliberate. Don't call me that. She glanced at the stove. And it's 2 a.m. You're making pasta. He set the glass down in front of her. You're eating it. He handed her the plate a second later. Their timing misfired. The glass tipped. Dark red wine spilled down the front of the sweatshirt and over her bare thigh. Nichole sucked in a breath. Tristan was around the island almost immediately, dish towel in hand, dropping to one knee in front of her before she'd processed the movement. The first pass of the towel was brisk and practical. The second slowed. Her breathing changed. The towel stopped halfway up her thigh. Neither of them moved. She could feel the warmth of his hand through the cloth, the weight of his attention on her face. Then Tristan rose and held the towel out to her. You can do the rest. The roughness at the edge of those words made her fingers tighten around the cloth. She cleaned the rest of the wine in silence and took her seat while he returned to the stove with a little too much concentration on a dish that was already done. They ate facing each other under low kitchen lights, the black glass of the windows throwing the sea back at them in reflection. After a few bites, Tristan set down his fork. Holloway can bring someone here by noon. I'll have your things collected from the house in the morning. Clean, efficient, necessary. She felt each word land anyway. Nichole twirled pasta around her fork and looked up. Do I at least get a dress? His gaze lifted to hers and held there for a moment, something shifting behind it, almost imperceptible. Maybe you save the real dress for the man you marry for love, Nick. He stopped. His jaw tightened once. Nichole. She pressed her lips together and looked down at her plate. Then at least buy me something white. By tomorrow afternoon, everyone in the Hamptons and half of Manhattan will know I married you. A quiet breath left him. Not quite a laugh. That I can do? She took another sip of wine. Then she set the glass down and met his eyes. You know I trust you more than anyone. He was quiet for a moment, not the dismissive kind, the kind that meant he was taking it in. You're safe with me, always. The words came low, without distance. You're mine to protect, Nick. That doesn't change. She felt that settle into her chest and stay. Later, after he sent her upstairs, Nichole stood at the guest room window. She wasn't looking at the sea. Tristan was outside by the pool, climbing out of the water, pool light sliding silver blue over wet skin, over the hard planes of his shoulders and back, the muscle in his arms as he reached for a towel. He dragged it over his hair, then down the back of his neck, unhurried, unaware of being watched. She was watching him and couldn't stop, her lower lip caught between her teeth, one palm pressed flat to the cold glass without realizing she'd reached for it. I'm really going to marry him. The thought settled through her like heat, slow, certain, a little frightening. Then a figure moved across the terrace. Jane. She was in heels and a dress that fit like a second skin, each step deliberate and unhurried across the flagstone. The kind of walk that knew it was being watched and had stopped caring. Her face carried that smile, the one that always arrived a half-second too early, warm enough to look genuine and precise enough not to be. She moved straight toward Tristan without slowing, without hesitation, as if the distance between them was hers to close whenever she chose. She stopped close. Too close. Tristan had the towel in one hand, his chin lifted, eyes on her, fully, completely. The same quality of attention Nichole had felt on herself across a kitchen an hour ago. Jane's hands moved, explaining something, gesturing, pulling him into whatever she was saying. Tristan didn't step back. He stood exactly where he was, watching her with that closed, measuring look of his, the towel loose at his side. Nichole's palm slid off the glass. She could not read their lips. She could not hear a word. What she could see, what she could not stop seeing, was how easily Jane stood there, how naturally. As if this terrace, this house, this version of Tristan with wet hair and a towel in his hand was something she had access to in a way Nichole had never been offered. Why is she here, in this house, at this hour? Nichole's chest went tight in a way that had nothing to do with grief or fear or the long catastrophe of the night. Then Tristan looked up, straight at the window, straight at her. She was still holding the curtain edge, one hand pressed to the glass, and she could feel the cold of it against her palm and the heat of his gaze at the same time. Both of them real, both of them pulling in opposite directions. Jane was still beside him. He didn't look at her. He kept looking at Nichole. She stood there longer than she should have, long enough that her next breath came unsteady, long enough that she had no excuse for what she was feeling. Then she let the curtain fall. When Nichole woke, the house was too quiet. For one disoriented second, she stared at the unfamiliar ceiling and felt nothing at all. Then everything came back. The gunshots, the hospital lights, Naomi's folder, Tristan's hand around her wrist, the pool, Jane in the blue glow outside, and the fact that by afternoon she would be married. She pushed herself upright too fast and felt the ache in her body immediately. Her throat was dry. The room still smelled faintly of the sea and of sleep she had never fully managed to fall into. Tristan was not there. The absence hit harder than it should have. Nichole showered, tied the robe around herself, and stepped into the hall still feeling raw and too awake in all the wrong places. She stood at the top of the staircase and listened. No low voice, no footsteps, no sound of cabinets or a pan on the stove, just the deep, expensive silence of a house that had been secured within an inch of its life. The kitchen was empty, and a note sat on the island beside a plate of fruit, 2 warm croissants under a cloth cover, and a cup of coffee that had long since stopped steaming. Nichole picked it up. She was still standing there with the robe pulled tight around her when she read it. Had some of your things brought over. Eat something. Be ready after noon. Tea. She was still holding it, the paper between her fingers, her eyes moving over those 3 lines again, as if she'd missed something. She hadn't. 2 large suitcases stood near the far wall, practical as a boarding pass, proof that he knew how to solve every problem except the woman standing in his house wearing his clothes. She let the note fall back onto the counter. For years she had been in love with Tristan Oswald, and somehow the reality of getting him looked an awful lot like being left alone with pastry and instructions. Her eyes moved to the croissants, then to the bowl of fruit. He had thought to feed her. He had thought to bring her things. He had remembered the dress, and still he had left. Maybe loving Tristan had always been easier from a distance. She hated how much that thought hurt. Nichole unzipped one of the suitcases and pulled out the first familiar things she found. Denim shorts, a fitted white t-shirt, underwear, sandals. She was pulling the t-shirt over her head when she caught the faint trace of her own perfume on it. Something from 2 days ago that already felt like someone else's life. She dressed and stood in the center of the room, with damp hair cooling against her neck, the villa's silence pressing in from every direction. A knock sounded at the door. One of Tristan's security men stood outside, holding a garment bag and a white shopping bag from Bergdorf's. "Mr. Oswald sent these for you, ma'am." Nichole took them and carried everything upstairs. The dress was white, not a wedding gown, not lace or tulle or fantasy, just long and clean and expensive, the fabric falling in one elegant line, the neckline dipping low enough to feel feminine without trying too hard. It was exactly the kind of dress a man like Tristan would choose for a woman he wanted to look beautiful without looking sentimental. At least he kept his word. Nichole sat on the edge of the bed with the dress spread across her lap and felt her eyes sting. A night ago she had been standing in front of a mirror trying not to admit she wanted Tristan to look at her and stop seeing a child. A night ago her father had been alive and laughing and choosing her cake. Now Kane lay unconscious in a hospital bed, while Tristan moved heaven and earth to keep Naomi's hands off his daughter. Her shoulders dropped. Did he ever really know what Naomi was capable of? The question settled over her, heavy and useless. She had no answer for it. She wasn't sure Kane did either. Another knock sounded downstairs. Nichole set the dress aside and went down. Eva was standing at the door in oversized sunglasses and a linen set that looked thrown on in 10 minutes and still somehow perfect. The moment she stepped inside, she pulled the glasses to the top of her head and let out a breath. "Your future husband's house is impossible. 2 security checkpoints, 1 camera scan, and then somebody had to call Tristan to make sure I wasn't planning to stab you with a mascara wand." Nichole flew at her. Something in her chest unclenched for the first time since the shooting. Eva caught her easily, then held her at arm's length. "Of course I came. I'm not missing this wedding, and I'm not letting you face it alone." Her eyes swept over Nichole's shorts and t-shirt. "Now show me the dress. We're going to make him lose his mind." That got the smallest smile out of her. Nichole started up the stairs, then slowed halfway. "Eva." Eva stopped and looked up at her. Nichole tightened her hand on the banister. "Jane was here last night." The shift in Ava's face was immediate. "What do you mean here?" "Outside, by the pool." Nichole looked away for a second toward the windows at the end of the hall. Tristan had just gotten out of the water. She walked straight up to him like she belonged there. The words tasted worse out loud. "She was talking to him, close." Nichole swallowed. "And I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't read his face. I just—" She stopped. "Ava, do you think they've been sleeping together?" Ava came up the stairs slowly, her expression losing all trace of teasing. "No," she said at last. "I don't." Nichole searched her face. "You're saying that because you love me." "I'm saying it because you're not wrong about Tristan being controlled." Ava came to stand one step below her. "He is. He always has been. If he wanted someone in his bed, he has options. But Jane," her nose wrinkled, "with Kane that close to him, with this mess happening, I don't buy it." Nichole stayed quiet. Ava touched her wrist lightly. "That doesn't mean she's harmless. It means don't build a whole affair out of one view through a window." Eva tilted her head toward the bedroom. "Come on. Show me the dress." Nichole let herself be pulled the rest of the way upstairs. When Eva unzipped the garment bag and saw the white dress, she let out a low sound. "Oh, he's annoying." Nichole looked over at her. "Why?" "Because this is exactly right." Eva lifted the dress by the shoulders and held it up against her. "Minimal, expensive, elegant, just enough skin to make him regret every cold thing he's said to you in the last 24 hours. A laugh escaped Nichole before she could stop it. Ava's eyes narrowed in approval. "There, keep that face. He deserves to suffer a little." Nichole touched the fabric with both hands. He could leave her alone with a note and still somehow choose the one dress that made her want to forgive him for it. That was the particular cruelty of Tristan Oswald. Not that he was cold, but that he was cold and still got everything right. Her throat tightened. Ava saw it and set the dress down at once. "Hey." Nichole looked at her. Ava's voice softened. "We'll get through today first. Then you can decide what to do with all the rest of it." Nichole nodded. She wanted to be furious with Tristan. She wanted to hold on to the image of him by the pool with Jane standing too close. She wanted to stay smart, stay wary, stay untouched. Instead, she stood in his house with a white dress in her hands and the knowledge that by afternoon she would belong to him on paper, and her pulse still betrayed her every time she imagined the look on his face when he saw her in it. Outside, the Atlantic pressed against the bluff in slow, restless waves. Inside, the day of her wedding had finally begun. Eva stood behind Nichole with the mascara wand in one hand and a makeup brush in the other, leaning in for the final touch around her eyes. "Don't blink." Nichole held still. The white dress skimmed her body in a long, clean line, elegant without trying too hard. The neckline low enough to make her feel like a woman and not a girl playing dress-up in someone else's life. In the mirror, she barely recognized the version of herself looking back. Not because she looked different, because the day did. Ava stepped back and tossed the brush onto the vanity. "There. Now turn." Nichole did. Ava's mouth softened. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then Ava moved closer and wrapped her arms around her. "Everything's going to work out, baby. I love you." Nichole closed her eyes and held on. "I don't know what my dad would say about this, Ava." Her voice came out quiet against Eva's shoulder. "I don't think he'd like me marrying Tristan, but he's also the only person Dad would trust to protect me." Ava's hand moved slowly over her back. "Life never asks for permission, Nick. We don't know what comes next." She pulled back just enough to look at her. "But I know one thing. We're in this together until we're old and mean." That got a laugh out of Nichole. Ava held out her fist. Nichole bumped it. Then Ava kissed 2 fingers and tapped them lightly to Nichole's cheek. The stupid little ritual they'd been doing since they were teenagers. And for one brief second, the pressure in Nichole's chest loosened. That was when they heard the cars. Both of them turned toward the window. 4 black SUVs rolled through the gates one after another and cut across the drive. Tristan got out of the first one in jeans and a dark t-shirt, sunglasses in one hand, looking like a man arriving to solve a problem rather than a groom returning for his wedding. Nichole's mouth flattened. Eva tipped her head, studying him through the glass. I mean, this version is not exactly suffering to look at either. Nichole gave her shoulder a light shove. For him, this is just something that has to get done. Her eyes stayed on Tristan as he crossed the drive without looking up. I don't think he has any idea what this means to me. Ava's expression softened, but she said nothing. Nichole kept watching until he disappeared through the front door below, then turned away from the window and sat on the edge of the bed. She pressed her palms flat against the white fabric spread across her knees. 20 minutes, maybe less. She breathed through it. A knock sounded at the bedroom door. Eva opened it first and immediately pressed her lips together, looking down with the kind of smile she was trying very hard not to show. Tristan stepped inside. He had showered. He was wearing a dark suit now, perfectly cut, no tie yet, the top button of his shirt undone. His hair was still faintly damp, darker at the temples, a few pieces fallen loose toward his forehead. The effect was unfair. "Ready, Nick?" The question left his mouth, but his eyes had already found her, and stayed. Nichole felt it all the way down to her fingertips. She was standing by the window with her hands loose at her sides, and she could feel his gaze moving over her the way she could feel sunlight, something you couldn't fully ignore no matter how still you tried to stand. Her next breath came slower than the one before it. He didn't move. Neither did she. The room narrowed around the silence until even Eva's presence faded to the edges of it. Then one corner of Tristan's mouth shifted. "White suits you." The words landed low and deep. Nichole lifted her chin. "Thank you, Tristan." Eva looked at the floor. Tristan's gaze dropped once, the dress, her collarbone, back to her face, and then he straightened and stepped aside from the doorway. Nichole walked toward him. Her spine was straight, her steps unhurried, the white fabric moving with her. She stopped close enough that she could smell the clean, dark scent of him, close enough that she had to lift her eyes to his. "All right, Tristan," she said quietly. "Let's make it official." The living room had been cleared for the ceremony, not decorated, not softened, just arranged. A city clerk stood near the windows with a leather folder in hand. Holloway was beside him, grave as ever, one hand resting over the papers as if he could keep the entire day from tipping in the wrong direction by force of will alone. Eva stayed close to Nichole's left. Tristan stood on her right, dark suit immaculate, face unreadable. He looked like a man holding himself so tightly nothing human could slip through. That was the worst part of it. Nichole kept her eyes forward until she couldn't anymore. Then she looked at him from the corner of her eye. His profile was cut clean in the afternoon light, jaw set, mouth still, not cold, just locked, whatever was happening under the surface of him staying there. The clerk began speaking. She was hearing the words, but they were reaching her in pieces: name, consent, marriage, law. While her pulse kept getting louder than all of it, she could feel it in her throat, in her wrists, in the tips of her fingers. Tristan reached into his jacket and took out the rings. The breath caught in her chest so suddenly she had to press her teeth to her lower lip. She was really doing this, really standing in Tristan Oswald's house in a white dress while a clerk prepared to make her his wife. The clerk looked up first at Tristan. "Do you take Nichole Lawrence?" "Yes." Tristan's answer came low and certain, cutting cleanly across the end of the question. Then, almost as if he felt the force of it after it left him, he turned his head a fraction and looked at her. No more than a second, but it went through her all the same. The clerk turned to her. "Nichole, do you take—" She gathered herself and lifted her chin. "Yes." The word came out clean. She hadn't been sure it would. Tristan took her left hand. The room disappeared at the first touch. His fingers were warm and sure around hers, the ring cool for one brief second before he slid it into place. The movement was careful, almost too careful, and that made it worse, more intimate, more real. Married, some reckless part of her whispered. Married to him. Her own hand shook once when she reached for the second ring. Ava's fingers closed around her forearm for half a second, grounding her. Nichole looked down at Tristan's hand, waiting for hers. Strong fingers, the dark sleeve of his suit, the pulse at the base of his wrist, a gold band against her palm. She lifted the ring. The front door slammed open hard enough to shake the room. The sharp strike of a crutch against hardwood followed. And then Sam was in the doorway, pale with pain, one hand locked around the crutch under his arm, fury holding him upright where strength probably couldn't. "Don't!" The word cracked through the ceremony. Nichole's hand stopped in mid-air. Tristan went still, the particular kind of stillness that meant he had already decided how this would end. Sam dragged himself farther inside, each step deliberate and labored. "Nichole, don't marry him." His breath caught once. He forced it down. "Do you even know who the man Tristan shot was?" The ring went cold between her fingers. Sam looked straight at her. "The man Tristan shot was a former employee, his own company." The air went out of the room. "Did he tell you that?" Sam's jaw tightened once before he pushed on. "Did he tell you the man he put down on your father's lawn used to work for him?" Ava's hand clamped around Nichole's arm. Nichole barely registered it. Her pulse had slammed so hard into her throat she couldn't swallow past it. The ring was still in her fingers. She could feel its weight in a way she hadn't 10 seconds ago, heavier now, loaded with everything she didn't know. Slowly she turned to Tristan. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Sam with something in his face that had no softness left in it at all. The ring slipped once in Nichole's fingers, caught the light and almost fell. Her eyes burned as she turned to Tristan. "What is he talking about?" Tristan did not look at her. His attention stayed on Sam, and when he answered, the words came so quiet they seemed to draw the air out of the room with them. "Get out of my house." Sam stood in the doorway with one hand locked around the crutch beneath his arm, pale with pain and fury, dragging each breath in, as if anger were doing half the work of holding him upright. When he looked at Nichole, his face changed just enough to make the performance visible. "He's lying to you." His eyes moved to Nichole, and something in them shifted into the practiced warmth she had never fully trusted. "You marry him, he gets closer to everything Kane built. Your shares, too." His jaw tightened. 10 years, Nick. We've been your family for 10 years. You trust us. Not him. Tristan started toward him then, and Nichole felt the whole room pull tighter around the movement. He did not rush. He did not raise his voice. But every step carried the same controlled purpose he brought to anything that mattered. And by the time he stopped in front of Sam, even the city clerk had gone still. "Only the police, and I knew that." Tristan's eyes stayed on Sam. "So how do you?" Sam's expression flickered. Tristan's eyes narrowed on it. "What game are you and Naomi playing?" "Enough!" Nichole's voice cracked through the room hard enough to stop them both. Her chest was rising too fast. The ring was still trapped between her fingers. Her father was lying unconscious in a hospital bed, and the two men standing in front of her, one his friend, one his family, were turning his blood into leverage while she stood there in white. "My father is fighting for his life." Her voice shook, and she let it. "And you are supposed to be his family, his friend." Her eyes moved from Sam to Tristan, and back again, disbelief catching so hard in her throat it nearly closed it. "I can't believe this is happening." She was already turning, already moving, her legs carrying her out before her mind had fully caught up with the decision. She didn't look back. She couldn't. "Nick!" Tristan's voice followed at once, stripped of ceremony, of restraint, of anything except command. "Come back here!" Sam moved too. He caught up with her first in the foyer, one hand closing around her arm above the elbow. "You're coming home with me." Nichole tore herself free so sharply, the crutch slipped on the marble with a violent scrape. "I'm not going anywhere with you." Ava came running from behind, heels in one hand, face white with alarm. "I'm getting you out of here, Nick." Tristan was already there. "Don't leave this house." He came straight to her, his voice lower now but somehow harder for it. "If you walk out, I can't protect you." Nichole spun back toward him with tears bright in her eyes and anger burning clean through them. "Stop telling me what to do." He reached for her anyway. His hand closed around her arm, warm and firm and familiar enough to hurt. "Nick," the word dropped low between them, "don't listen to Sam. I'm trying to find out who did this." She looked down at his hand on her arm, then back into his face. "I told you I trusted you more than anyone." She watched it reach him, the way his jaw shifted, something flickering behind his eyes before he could stop it. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her voice broke on the last word. "How am I supposed to believe you now?" He had no answer. For the first time since Sam walked through the door, nothing came. That silence was worse than anything Sam had said. "Let go of me." He held on for 1 second too long. Then Ava stepped in and pulled Nichole back. And this time Tristan let her go. The cold where his hand had been settled into her skin and stayed. She stood there for 1 breath, 2, feeling the exact shape of his grip in the air where it no longer was. Then Eva's hand found her elbow and pulled her forward, and she made herself move. Ava got her out the front door and into the passenger seat before anyone could stop them again. The engine turned over hard. Gravel kicked beneath the tires. Nichole pressed her palm flat to the cold window as the gates began to open, her eyes fixed on the doorway behind them. 2 figures stood in the light, Sam leaning on his crutch, Tristan a step ahead of him, completely still. She could not read his face from here. Her hand pressed harder against the glass without her telling it to. Then the car turned, and the light disappeared, and she faced forward and pressed her fingers to her mouth and did not make a sound. Inside the foyer, Tristan hit Sam hard enough to send the crutch skidding across the marble. Sam was still grabbing for the edge of the console table when Tristan stepped forward again, the last of his control gone. Nothing left in its place but the clean, cold thing underneath it. "You manipulative little bastard!" Sam wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and smiled through the blood. Tristan's voice dropped lower still. "If you or Naomi go near her again, I will finish this." Sam bent, grabbed the crutch, and dragged himself upright. The smile never left his face. He turned and limped toward the door without another word. Tristan did not follow him. He stayed where he was, his eyes fixed on the taillights disappearing beyond the gates, his jaw locked so hard the muscle in it moved once. When he finally spoke, it was to the empty stretch of drive in front of him. "You can run from me today, Nick." His hand flexed once at his side. "You're still my wife." Ava drove straight to the hospital. Nichole was watching the world outside without seeing it. Hedges, stone walls, long strips of late light sliding across the windshield. While her body was still back in Tristan's foyer, still carrying the shock of Sam's voice, the scrape of the crutch on marble, the weight of a ring she had not been ready to wear. By the time they reached the ICU wing, the shaking had gone inward. Kane lay beyond a wall of glass and controlled light, surrounded by machines that breathed and blinked with an almost offensive steadiness. The room was too white, too calm, too clean for the violence that had put him there. He looked smaller in the bed than he had ever looked anywhere in his life, the force of him reduced to stillness and tubing, and the stubborn rise and fall of a chest that had not given up yet. Nichole stepped close enough for her fingertips to meet the glass. She pressed them there until they hurt. Her breath fogged the pain in small, uneven clouds. "Dad?" The word caught in her throat. She swallowed and tried again, her forehead lowering to the cold glass. "I'm going to show them I grew up." Her eyes closed for a second. "I'm your daughter." Her next breath shook, but she pushed through it. "I'm not going to let anyone use me. Not Naomi, not Sam, not anybody." The tears came then, hot and silent, tracking down her face and dropping onto her collarbone before she registered them. She let them. A doctor approached after a minute, speaking with the practiced gentleness of someone who had learned how to deliver hard limits without sounding cruel. "There's no reason to stay here right now. If he wakes up, we'll call you immediately." Nichole nodded, wiped her face and stepped back from the glass. In the hallway, Eva stayed close enough that the warmth of her shoulder was there when Nichole needed it. They walked in silence until they reached the elevators. Only when the doors opened did Eva turn fully toward her. "What are you going to do now?" Nichole looked at her own reflection in the metal doors as they slid shut, pale, swollen-eyed, held together badly. "Can I stay with you for a few days?" Eva looked almost insulted by the question. "Obviously." The corner of Nichole's mouth moved without becoming a smile. "I can't go back to my father's house," she murmured. "And I can't go to Tristan. Not until I can think straight." "Then you're with me." Eva watched her for a moment. "But first, one clean answer before your brain turns this into something even worse." Nichole lifted her eyes. "The sheriff." The station was smaller than she expected and colder than it needed to be. By the time they were shown into the office, Nichole had gone quiet again. But it was a different quiet now. Not collapse, not grief. Something narrower, something sharper, sitting low behind her sternum like a fist that had decided to stay closed. She was watching the sheriff when he took off his glasses and looked from her to Eva. She could see the moment he recalibrated, the slight shift in his posture, the way he stopped reaching for the easy tone he'd used on Kane's lawn the night before. He was looking at someone different now. She wanted him to. The man Oswald shot did used to work security for his company. Nichole held his gaze and waited. The sheriff slid a file a few inches across the desk without opening it. "Oswald brought that to us himself before we confirmed it." Something in her chest loosened. Not enough to breathe freely, but enough to matter. "He told you." A short nod. "As soon as he had it." Nichole looked down at her hands. He hadn't buried it. That didn't erase the fact that Tristan had known and let her stand in white without hearing it from him first, but it changed the shape of the wound, and that mattered. Sam had wanted her afraid, and fear, she realized now, had suited him far too well. The sheriff put his glasses back on. "We're still working the rest. Who ordered it? Who paid? Why Kane? Why then? We'll get there." Nichole raised her head. "If you do, call me. Not Naomi, not Sam, me." This time the sheriff's nod came without hesitation. By the time Eva turned into her family's drive, the light had gone honey gold over the Hamptons. The villa sat behind trimmed hedges and white stone, beautiful in the infuriating way summer houses always were when they belonged to people who had never once needed to choose practicality over beauty. And parked in front of it, dark against the gravel, was Tristan's car. Nichole saw it before Eva killed the engine. Of course he was here. He was leaning against the driver's side door with his arms folded, suit jacket gone, white shirt sleeves rolled, tie loosened at the throat, as if he had stripped off the ceremony but not the day. He looked like a man who had been waiting long enough to run out of patience and had decided not to hide it. Eva turned slowly, studying Tristan through the windshield with the calm assessment of someone pricing a problem. "Do you want me to hit him with the car? I'd keep it slow. Deniable." Despite everything, Nichole almost smiled. "No. Such a waste of a good angle." She stepped out first. She could feel him watching her before she looked at him. That particular weight of his attention she had never quite learned to ignore. She kept her eyes on the steps and kept moving. She was 2 steps from the door when his voice came, low and stripped of any pretense that this was a request. "You're coming with me." That stopped her. She turned back, anger rising so fast it steadied her. "No, I'm not." He pushed away from the car and came a few steps closer. The distance between them shrank, and with it went the thin illusion that she could treat him like scenery. "This isn't a discussion." The words came out flat and certain, the tone he used when he had already made a decision and was simply waiting for the room to catch up. "It stopped being your decision when you started keeping things from me." Her hands were shaking again, but she held them still at her sides. "I don't trust you. I don't trust Sam. I don't trust Naomi. Apparently everyone in my life has secret motives and a deeply unhealthy relationship with controlling me." His mouth hardened. He said nothing, which was worse. She took a step back toward the house. "I'm not going back to your house." "House?" He came closer still, not enough to touch, enough to make her lift her chin to hold the stare. "It's our house now." The words landed low. She hated that they did. She lifted her chin. "I'm staying with Eva." For a moment his face changed, and what showed through the anger was worse. Not softness, fear. The kind a man like Tristan would rather choke on than name. This isn't about your pride, Nick. Quieter now. The edge still there, but stripped of performance. It's about keeping you alive. When I shot that man, his gun was pointed at you. If I'd been half a second slower, we wouldn't be standing here. She held his gaze. Then I'm taking the risk. A flicker of disbelief crossed his face before it hardened into something darker. Don't do this. 2 words, low and unyielding. She stepped past him. I'm done being moved around like a package. She turned toward the house. His hand closed around her wrist. The contact stopped her cold, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. Because it was familiar enough to slide straight under the anger and press against something much less useful. Before she could twist away, he bent and lifted her clean off the ground. Nichole sucked in a breath, shock before anger, her hands finding his shoulders on pure instinct, her body registering the warmth and solidity of him before her mind could object to any of it. Put me down. Ava's mouth fell open. Then, because she was Eva, she grinned. Tristan ignored her completely. He was already moving toward the car with Nichole in his arms, holding her as if the matter had been decided long before either of them arrived. She pushed against his chest. Put me down. You're my wife. He opened the passenger door with one hand. You're coming home. That word hit her harder than the lift had. Home. Landing somewhere she hadn't fortified against it. She twisted enough to look at him properly then, and her eyes dropped before she meant them to. His ring was still on. The gold band sat on his finger as if it had always belonged there. Her chest stumbled on the sight of it. Her voice came out barely above a breath. You're wearing it. His grip tightened slightly beneath her knees, beneath her back. We signed the papers. His eyes stayed on the car. You're Mrs. Oswald now. The words landed one after another, not gentle enough to soothe, not rough enough to reject, just certain. Maddeningly certain. He set her in the passenger seat and leaned in long enough to pull the belt across her body himself. The brush of his knuckles against her waist sent a hot, furious pulse through her that had nothing to do with anger. He straightened. Sit still. Then he shut the door. Ava was standing in the drive with her arms folded now, watching all of it with open fascination and a smile she was trying only half-heartedly to hide. As Tristan rounded the hood, she called out, Call me later, Nichole, preferably with details. Nichole stared at her through the windshield. Traitor. Tristan slid into the driver's seat. The interior filled at once with the clean, dark scent of him, leather, lingering heat, and the impossible fact of the ring still catching the light on his hand as he reached for the wheel. Nichole turned her face toward the window and kept it there, but her eyes found his hand anyway. Mrs. Oswald, why was it so hard to fight a man who made possession sound so much like shelter? The front door had barely closed behind them when Nichole started for the stairs. She did not look back. The white dress brushed her legs with every quick, furious step, and the ring on her hand felt heavier now than it had in the ceremony room, less like jewelry, more like evidence. Tristan caught her before she reached the first landing. His hand closed around her arm, firm enough to stop her, not rough enough to give her the satisfaction of outrage. Come here. We're talking. She turned on him so fast the loose hair at her temple whipped across her cheek. Now, you want to talk? His grip eased, but it did not leave her. For a moment he only looked at her, and there was something different in his face now, less command, more effort, as if whatever he was about to say did not come naturally to him, and he knew she would hear that. Nichole. Her name, low and careful in his mouth, stopped her more completely than his hand had. He led her into the sitting room and waited until she sat before taking the armchair across from her. She noticed that immediately. He did not tower over her this time. He sat down. She kept her eyes on the floor. You were right, he began. I should have told you what I found before today. I keep trying to keep you outside it, and I was wrong. Her gaze lifted then. Tristan Oswald admitting fault should not have been enough to throw her off balance, and yet it did. She leaned back slowly, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. "Well," she murmured, "that's new." One corner of his mouth shifted, but it did not become a smile. "I found out before the police confirmed it that the shooter had worked security for my company 5 years ago. I gave them the name as soon as I had it. He's still unconscious. When he wakes, I'll have answers." He spread his hands once, a movement so brief it almost escaped notice. "That's all I know right now." Then he rose, as if the facts themselves should do the rest. That did it. She was already moving before she fully registered the decision, crossing the distance between them, stopping close enough that she had to tip her chin to hold his gaze. "Tristan Oswald." Her voice had sharpened, but it did not tremble. Not yet. "You drag me back here, drop 2 sentences in my lap, and expect me to trust you again?" He did not interrupt. He didn't move, didn't offer a defense, just stood there absorbing it. And the stillness of him made her angrier than any argument could have. "You keep moving me around like I'm fragile and decorative." Her breath came quicker now, heat rising under her skin. "You hide things, you decide things, you call me Nick when it suits you, and then you look at me like all of this should calm me down." His eyes stayed on her face, steady and unreadable in a way that made her want to shake him. She stepped closer. "It's time you started taking me seriously." The words were still in the air when the room shifted. The edge of the table blurred. Tristan's face seemed to move back half an inch and then forward again. Nichole blinked hard, once, then twice, but the floor still felt strangely far away. He saw it before she could hide it. His hand came to her waist just as her balance gave. "Nichole!" He was already lowering her toward the sofa, one arm braced behind her back, her head swimming, the room tilting around his voice, stripped of every sharp edge. "When did you last eat?" She tried to answer and couldn't catch the words in time. His eyes moved over her face once, quick and searching, and whatever he saw there hardened him into action. "Your kit. Where is it?" She heard herself say something that might have been upstairs, or bag, or nothing useful at all. He came back in under a minute with the emergency glucagon kit in one hand and the small black pouch from her suitcase in the other. He dropped to his knees beside the sofa, tore the packaging open with a controlled efficiency that told her this was not guesswork for him. He had known about her diabetes since she was a child. He knew the signs when her blood sugar dropped too fast, and the fact that he was already moving, already certain, was the cruelest comfort she had ever felt. "Stay with me." The words came low and steady. She felt his hand at the back zipper of her dress, loosening it just enough to reach her abdomen without fighting the fabric. Cool air touched her skin. Then his fingers were at her lower stomach, careful and precise as he pinched a small fold of skin and prepared the shot. The injection stung, and her body flinched before she could stop it. "I know." His hand stayed there for 1 second longer than it needed to, grounding rather than holding. By the time he set the kit aside, her dress had slipped lower at one shoulder, exposing the white lace strap beneath. His eyes flicked there once by accident. His hand stopped. His gaze shifted away at once. A muscle moved once in his cheek, and when he reached for the fabric to pull it back into place, his touch had changed completely. More measured now, almost formal, as if respect required precision, and he was giving himself no room to fail at it. That landed harder than the look itself. Nichole's breathing began to steady a few minutes later, though the weakness stayed in her limbs, deep and humiliating. She let her head sink back against the cushion. Tristan was still crouched beside her, one forearm braced on the sofa edge, his attention fixed on her face with the same unwavering focus he gave to danger. "Are you with me?" She turned toward him slowly. "I'm just tired." The tension in his shoulders dropped, barely enough to notice. He rose. "I'm taking you upstairs." She was too exhausted to argue this time. He slid one arm beneath her knees, the other behind her back, and lifted her with a care that was almost worse than force. Her cheek brushed the open collar of his shirt as he carried her up the stairs, and he smelled like clean cotton, skin, and the day she had not been able to escape since morning. In the bedroom, he laid her down on top of the covers and straightened slowly. The loosened zipper had left the dress twisted at her waist. His eyes moved there once. "We need to get you out of this." The words were practical. His voice was not entirely. Nichole let her eyes close while he eased the dress down and away, careful where he looked, more careful where he didn't. By the time he pulled the blanket over her, she was in her underwear, and too drained to feel embarrassed in any ordinary way. She only felt the coolness of the sheets, the warmth of his hands through the blanket when he tucked it around her, and the strange vulnerability of being this helpless in front of the one man she most wanted not to need. He started to step back. Her fingers caught his wrist. The word came out thin and quiet. "Stay." He looked down at her hand on him, then at her face. There was a moment there, suspended and difficult, in which she could almost see the argument moving behind his eyes. Then he exhaled, shrugged off his jacket, and rolled his sleeves higher before settling onto the bed beside her, not close enough to touch, leaving just enough space to tell both of them he still remembered how dangerous this was. Nichole turned toward him anyway. It was half instinct, half exhaustion. One slow shift of her body, then another, until her forehead found the broad warmth of his chest, and her hand came to rest there too. Beneath her palm, his heartbeat was steady, too steady for everything else. Her voice came out small. "I miss my dad." The word slipped out with her next breath. For a second his hand hovered over her hair without landing, then his fingers moved through it carefully, almost tentatively, as if he were relearning something he had once known by instinct and no longer trusted himself to do without harm. Nichole let her eyes close. The room had gone quiet around them, not empty, but full of everything they had stopped saying for the night. His chest rose under her cheek, his fingers kept moving through her hair, slow and unhurried, and the last thing she registered before sleep pulled her under was the way he went still beneath her for one strange, suspended second. He was not holding the frightened 11-year-old girl he had dragged out of black water anymore. That was the problem, and he was finally out of excuses. It was close to midnight when Nichole opened her eyes. For one suspended second she didn't know where she was. Then warmth registered before memory did, a broad, steady warmth beneath her cheek, the slow rise and fall of a body under her own, the deep quiet of a room that had long since gone dark. The blanket had slipped somewhere during the night. Her dress was gone. She was lying half over him in white lace, one of his arms curved around her waist, as if her body had found its way there in sleep, and his had accepted it without question. Nichole clapped a hand over her mouth. "Oh my God!" The shock lasted only a second before something softer moved in under it, warm, bright, absurdly shy. She lifted her head a little and looked at him properly, the open collar of his shirt, the line of his throat, the dark lashes resting against his cheek. Sleep had taken 10 years off him and changed nothing important. He still looked dangerous. He still looked like the sort of man a sane woman should admire from a careful distance and never, under any circumstances, wake up draped across in her underwear. Her own hand was resting against bare skin just above the open buttons of his shirt. She lifted it as if she had touched a live wire. Very carefully, barely breathing, she tried to ease herself back. The movement woke him. His hand tightened at her waist before his eyes even opened, drawing her a fraction closer on pure instinct. When he spoke, his voice was rough with sleep and low enough to brush directly across her nerves. "Nick, you okay?" Their faces were suddenly too close. "I'm okay." The words left her in a whisper. Tristan opened his eyes fully then, and whatever sleep had still been holding on to him vanished all at once. His gaze sharpened. He became aware of her weight, her face, the white lace, the fact that they were nearly mouth to mouth. And then his hand left her waist so abruptly she felt the cold of it before she had registered the loss, as if contact had been the default and absence was the correction. A second later, he was upright against the headboard, one forearm braced over a bent knee. Nichole moved too fast in the opposite direction and ended up tangled in the sheet, dragging it over herself with hot cheeks and more indignation than dignity. "You scared me." He was looking anywhere but directly at her now. Your blood sugar crashed. He reached toward the side table for the water glass someone had left there and glanced back at her. "Did you eat anything after that?" She was watching him. The controlled efficiency he was trying to pull back on, the careful avoidance of her eyes, and the effort of it lit the fuse of her temper all over again. "I was supposed to be getting married today," she shot back, clutching the blanket higher against her chest. "I was a little distracted. Then I found out my new husband had kept information from me and somehow food stopped feeling urgent." One corner of his mouth moved. "Well," his eyes came back to her at last. "That's at least a better excuse than most." She stared at him. "You nearly passed out, and you're still difficult." The line came low, dry, almost comforting despite itself. "It's reassuring." He started to swing his legs off the bed. "Where are you going?" The question came out quieter than she intended. He glanced at her. Downstairs. You need food. Her hand caught his wrist before she could rethink it. Wait. The contact stopped both of them. Nichole became immediately aware of how warm he was, how visible the veins were beneath his skin, how still he had gone under her hand. Tristan looked down at her fingers, where they curved over his wrist, then back at her face. She let go and made herself ask anyway. Is there anything else you're not telling me? The question left her more carefully than the jealousy underneath it deserved. He didn't answer at once. What do you mean? His tone stayed even, but she could feel the caution in it now. She drew the blanket tighter around herself, a fraction higher than necessary, which was its own kind of confession, and lifted her chin. Jane. His expression changed by a degree, no more. She was here last night. Nichole kept her eyes on him. She got into your house like she had every right to be here. Does she always? Her voice sharpened. Do women come and go that easily in general, or is that privilege specific to Jane? Now he did smile, slight but unmistakable. I see marriage has made an impression on you already. The lazy amusement in it made her furious all over again. This marriage is temporary, he went on, the faint curve at his mouth sharpening the sting of it. You are aware of that, Nick. He stopped himself. She caught it, the correction from Nick to Nichole, and that helped less than it should have. Don't be ridiculous. She let out a short breath and gathered the blanket tighter, trying to recover some dignity without looking as if she were recovering anything at all. You didn't actually think I was jealous, did you? The words came out with more heat than grace. I was curious, that's all. Jane was here, she got in very easily, and I wanted to know what you were talking about. Her eyes narrowed. Was it about my father? That changed him faster than the jealousy had. The amusement drained out of his face. He reached out and tipped her chin up before she could look away. The touch was light. The effect was not. Don't doubt me where Kane is concerned. His gaze held hers without wavering. He's the closest person I have in this life. His thumb shifted once under her chin. And you're what matters to him. To me. He stopped there. She could feel the place where he had chosen not to finish. The breath that came instead of the rest of the sentence. The way his jaw tightened once before he let it go. She would have preferred hunger, possession, something less careful and more dangerous. Instead, he let her go, tilted his head slightly, and forced the subject forward. Jane came because I wanted her here. I needed to know what people were saying at the company, who knew what and who was talking too much. I couldn't go in myself, so I had her come to me. Nichole gave a small shrug that didn't hide her skepticism. You could have done that over the phone. A faint smile touched his mouth again. If I need to know whether someone is lying, I prefer to look them in the eye. That left them staring at each other. She was the one who moved first, leaning in slowly, deliberately, giving him every chance to stop her. The blanket slipped from one shoulder. She didn't fix it. She only kept her eyes on his. Direct, unhurried, the same quality of attention he had just described giving to other people. His eyes narrowed with that almost smile still there. What? She was close enough to feel his breath against her lips when she whispered it. Did you really have to marry me to protect me, Tristan? He swallowed. She saw it. Then his lower lip twitched once before he caught it. And that tiny loss of control undid something in her more effectively than a confession would have. I wanted your rights protected legally. The words came slower now, no longer effortless. Physically, you were already safer with me. His gaze dropped to her mouth and rose again. As long as you're with me, no one would dare touch you. Nichole's pulse jumped hard enough to hurt. As long as I'm with you, she repeated softly. This time the twitch at his mouth was sharper, almost pained. He was looking at her as if the sight of her there, wrapped in white lace and close enough to close the distance herself, had become harder to manage than whatever he had walked in from downstairs. Then he turned his head away and rose from the bed with deliberate slowness, putting distance back between them before the room could close the rest of it on its own. You still need food. He was 2 steps from the door when her voice stopped him. Tristan. He turned back. Nichole was looking at the wall now, not at him. That made what came next feel less like performance and more like something that had escaped while her guard was down. If we're doing this, I'm not going to be made ridiculous by whatever it is you do with other women." The words came out more steadily than she felt. He didn't answer right away. She could hear him breathing behind her. Her cheeks flamed, but she kept going. "I can't go back to New York with people talking about my husband and some revolving door of women like I'm supposed to smile through it." She glanced at him then, quick and sharp and embarrassed all at once. It would be humiliating. For 1 second, he simply stared at her. Then the expression began at his mouth and spread with visible effort, as if he were trying very hard not to enjoy this as much as he did. "Your reputation matters, of course." His tone was perfectly serious. His face was not cooperating. Nichole narrowed her eyes at him. "Don't. I wouldn't dream of it." The smile deepened anyway, impossible now to hide. "Naturally, Mrs. Oswald, your dignity is under my protection as well." She wanted to throw something at him. Instead, she watched him reach the doorway, still trying and failing not to laugh. "Put something on," he told her, glancing back over one shoulder. "Then come downstairs." He disappeared into the hall. A second later, she heard him on the stairs, slower than usual, and then his voice carried back just clearly enough to reach her. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, amused and troubled in equal measure. "You're a menace, Nichole." She sat there in the dark with the blanket pulled to her chin and her face on fire. She had heard every word. She was absolutely going to pretend she hadn't. When Nichole came downstairs, Tristan was in the kitchen making sandwiches. Just Tristan in his white shirt, sleeves still rolled, standing at the island as if cutting bread required the same focus he brought to everything else. He glanced up when she stepped in, took in the oversized sweatshirt, brushing the tops of her thighs, then slid a plate toward her. "Sit." She dropped into the chair. She was hungrier than the argument in her chest was worth. She was watching him work, the economy of his movements, the way he didn't waste a single gesture, when he looked up and caught her at it. She looked down at her plate. "What?" he asked. She took a bite before answering. "After that impossibly polished Manhattan life of yours, this is not what I expected." Her gaze moved around the room. "I thought there'd be more drama, more people, more evidence that you enjoy being Tristan Oswald." A quiet breath left him that almost passed for a laugh. He set down the knife. "I like being alone." Nichole leaned back a little. "So family life was never really your dream?" He chewed, swallowed, and kept his eyes on her. "If I ever have a child, it'll be with a woman I love." The line came low and matter-of-fact, as if he were saying something unremarkable, instead of dropping it straight into the middle of her chest. "I haven't met her yet." Nichole stared at him longer than she should have, then let out an exaggerated little sound. "Wow, so your heart is the difficult room." Her eyes flicked up to his. "Not just your bed." That got him. "Nichole," his brows lifted, "you are drifting into very private territory." She put a hand to her chest, eyes wide. "Sorry, I thought we were married." That pulled a brief laugh from him, small but real, and she hated how much she liked being the reason for it. Her phone lit up on the island a second later, then again, and again. She frowned and reached for it. The first message made her sit up straighter. The second made her stomach drop. "Oh my God, Nichole! Tell me this is not true. Please tell me you did not marry Tristan Oswald. Is everyone lying, or is this real?" More messages kept stacking up. Friends from school, people from New York, girls who lived for this kind of story. Her sandwich went back down on the plate. Tristan was already watching her. What happened? Everyone knows. She turned the phone slightly, then let it fall back to the counter. "My friends. School. Probably half of New York by breakfast." He reached across the island and took her hand. The contact was warm, steady, infuriatingly calm. "Let them talk." His thumb moved once over her knuckles. "People get bored. Then they move on." Nichole looked down at their hands. "I'm going back to school in a month. They won't be bored by then." He didn't let go. His thumb stilled against her knuckles. "You don't owe anyone an explanation. People only get as much access as you give them." She swallowed. He leaned forward slightly. "Kane wakes up," he went on, quieter now. "We deal with Naomi, we deal with the rest of it, and then you go back to your life. One thing at a time." "You go back to your life?" He meant it kindly. She could hear that in every syllable. That was the worst part. She held very still for a moment. She could feel his thumb resting against her knuckles, warm and unhurried, and she hated that it felt like the most natural thing in the room. She nodded once, slipped her hand from under his, pushed her chair back, and stood. Tristan looked up at her immediately. "Nichole?" She turned toward the stairs. "I'm tired." The words came out too quickly, too flat, and she knew he heard it. She turned and headed for the stairs before he could follow the thought to the place it had really landed, his silence following her across the kitchen. She was aware of it, the way she was aware of heat, present and impossible to ignore. At the landing she stopped, one hand on the railing. Behind her the kitchen light was still on. She could see the edge of it on the wall below, warm and steady. She could hear him down there, the quiet sound of him moving through his own house. She wanted to go back down. She made herself go upstairs instead. But she stood at the top with her hand still on the railing, her fingers curled around the wood, listening to the silence below until it became something she had to actively choose to walk away from. When Nichole woke, she felt strangely light. For a few seconds she lay there without moving, aware only of the sun warming the sheets and the unfamiliar, almost reckless lift in her chest. None of the reasons for fear had disappeared in the night, and yet she felt good, which was suspicious in itself. She pushed back the covers. The floorboards were cool under her bare feet when she crossed to the window, cooler than she expected, a small, sharp fact that her body noted before her mind caught up. The sea beyond the bluff was bright now, all cold blue and hammered silver under the late morning sun. Below, the pool caught the light in sharper flashes, and Tristan was in it. She stopped at the glass. He was cutting through the water in long, efficient strokes, powerful enough to look almost impatient. For one suspended second, she was not seeing the pool. She was 11 again. Men were shouting, hands were grabbing at her, salt flooding her mouth. The black chop of open water under a moonless sky. One of the kidnappers laughing when they threw her overboard, as if fear itself were entertainment. Then the cold hit, the panic, the pull downward, and after it, Tristan. She still remembered the moment he reached her, the force of his arms around her, the smell of seawater and gun oil, and that dark, clean scent that had somehow still been Tristan even then. He held her against him while kicking them both back toward air, and she had clung to him with everything she had. She pressed her fingertips to the glass. He would always see her as that girl, the one he had dragged back from black water, the one who had coughed and clung to him and shaken in his arms. Below, Tristan reached the edge of the pool and pulled himself out in one smooth movement. Nichole turned away from the window too fast, changed into shorts and a loose tank, and ran downstairs barefoot with an energy that now felt less like joy and more like defiance. By the time Tristan came inside, she was in the kitchen with a bowl, a fork, and several eggs she had attacked with more confidence than skill. She was whisking like a woman trying to prove a point to the air itself. The back door opened. Tristan stepped in from the terrace in swim shorts, water still running down his chest and arms, a towel draped around his neck. He stopped when he saw her at the island. His gaze moved from the eggs to her face. "Good morning. I didn't know you and the kitchen were acquainted." Nichole lifted her chin and kept whisking. "Of course we are. I'm a woman, Tristan. It's practically in my blood." One eyebrow went up. "Is that right?" She kept whisking without looking at him. "Absolutely." The fork hit the side of the bowl a little too hard. A fleck of egg jumped onto the counter. His mouth moved at one corner. Comforting. She narrowed her eyes at him, but before she could answer, the doorbell rang. Tristan went to get it. Nichole kept whisking for exactly 2 seconds, then stopped and listened. A low, male voice. Tristan answering. The sound of paper changing hands. When he came back into the kitchen, he had a large ivory envelope in one hand. He was looking at it, not at her. Nichole set down the fork. "What is that?" His eyes came up to hers. "Nothing we can't deal with." She crossed the kitchen and took the envelope from his hand before he could decide what to do with it next. Something in the way he let her, without resistance, without hesitation, tightened the back of her neck. She pulled out the documents and scanned the first page. The legal language came dense and fast, but the meaning underneath it arrived with brutal clarity. Emergency petition. Temporary guardianship review. Protective administration of assets. She read faster, her pulse picking up with each line. Her father's coma. her own medical vulnerability, the words chronic type 1 diabetes sitting there in black ink, recent hypoglycemic collapse, compromised judgment, susceptibility to coercion. The next paragraph hit harder. Her marriage to Tristan Oswald was being challenged as a union entered under duress while under severe emotional trauma. There would be a formal review. An injunction had already been requested. By the time she reached the final page, her hands were shaking. Naomi is asking the court to take temporary control of my accounts. The words came out thin at first, then sharpened. And my Lawrence Group Authority. She looked up at him. She's saying I can't make decisions for myself. Tristan was very still. Nichole looked back at the paper. She wants me removed from your house and returned to a stable family environment. She stopped on the phrasing, and her jaw tightened, meaning her. The bowl of eggs sat abandoned on the counter between them, absurd and bright and harmless. She's using my diabetes. Nichole's voice dropped lower with every word. She's using Dad being in a coma. She's using the wedding. She's using you. Her fingers tightened on the papers. She's trying to turn me into a child on paper. Tristan took one step toward her. She won't get away with it. Nichole looked up fast, her jaw tight. No, do not do that. He stopped. She was breathing too quickly now, the pages trembling in her grip. Don't stand there and tell me she won't get away with it like I'm supposed to calm down and let you handle this. Her eyes burned. That's exactly what she wants. You taking control, her taking control, everybody taking control. His face shifted. Not anger, not exactly. Recognition. Nichole pressed the papers flat against the island. She wants a court to believe I'm too unstable to think, too sick to manage my own life, and too frightened to know what marriage I walked into. Her throat tightened. She pushed through it. She wants to say I belong to whoever sounds more powerful in the room. The kitchen had gone silent, except for the soft tick of water still falling from Tristan's hair onto the floorboards. He pulled the towel from around his neck and set it aside. Then, very deliberately, he took the papers from under her hand, laid them flat, and looked at her. Then we make sure the room hears you first. Nichole stared at him. Her pulse was still too fast. Her stomach had dropped out. Naomi's words were all over the page, but underneath the panic, underneath the humiliation, something else had begun to rise. Slower, harder, cleaner. Rage, clean and certain. She put both palms on the counter and leaned in. She thinks I'll fold. Tristan's gaze did not leave hers. Will you? Nichole's fingers curled once against the stone. No. The word left her low and steady. Then she looked down at the abandoned bowl of eggs, the fork still half submerged in yellow, and gave a disbelieving little laugh that had no humor in it at all. My omelette lasted 4 minutes. For a second something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Almost nothing. Almost a smile, gone before it arrived. His phone started ringing before either of them moved. Tristan looked at the screen. Whatever was on it flattened his expression in an instant. Not alarm. Something colder than that. He answered at once, eyes still on her. She could feel the weight of that, his gaze holding while his voice went somewhere else entirely. What happened? A silence stretched on his end. She could see it landing in his face before he spoke again. The words came out low and flat, with no room in them for anything but the answer. Who took him? Tristan ended the call and pushed back from the island so fast the chair legs scraped hard against the floor. Nichole straightened. What happened? His jaw had gone rigid. Stay here. I'm going out. He was already moving toward the hall, not looking at her. They took him from the hospital. Nichole's hand tightened around the phone. The shooter? Yes. He didn't slow down. How does someone get taken out of a hospital? She was around the island now, keeping pace with him. I'm coming with you. He turned too sharply. I said, stay here. The words hit the air hard enough that she stopped, not from obedience but from the sheer force of him, the way the room seemed to tighten around his voice. Her breath caught. Her chin dropped a fraction before she pulled it back up, and she looked away fast, jaw tight. Tristan shut his eyes for one beat and opened them again. Sorry. The word came rougher than he intended. He stepped back toward her and brushed his hand over her cheek. There's dangerous work closing in around us, and I'm not leaving you exposed in the middle of it. Her eyes were bright, but her chin came up anyway. You don't get to lock me in this house. I'm not hiding in here while everyone else makes decisions. He held her gaze for a second, then put out his hand. Phone. She frowned but gave it to him. His thumbs moved quickly over the screen. Nichole folded her arms. Are you tracking me now? He handed it back without apology. Of course I'm tracking you. If you leave this house, you don't leave alone. 2 of my men stay with you, and I know where you are every minute. His eyes stayed on hers. That isn't changing. She heard him take the stairs 2 at a time, and then the house went quiet in a way that pressed against her chest. Nichole stood in the kitchen with the phone still in her hand, the legal papers spread open on the counter, the abandoned bowl of eggs beside them, and the whole morning broken in half around her. A few minutes later, he came back down in dark jeans, boots, a black shirt, and the expression he wore when both versions of him stopped pretending to be separate people. He crossed toward the door, then slowed. She was standing at the island with her hair loose over her shoulders, one hand braced against the stone, her lower lip caught between her teeth. She wasn't looking at anything. She was thinking. He could see it in the stillness of her, the way her fingers pressed into the counter as if the stone could help her work it out. Something pulled low and sharp through his chest. He had told himself she was a responsibility. Kane's daughter. The girl he had once dragged out of black water. That had been true once. Simple, clean, something a man could carry without looking too closely at the weight of it. Standing here now, watching her stand alone in his kitchen with Naomi's papers on one side and a bowl of cold eggs on the other, still fighting, still thinking, still refusing to fold. He wasn't sure that was what she was anymore. Lock the door behind me, he told her, quieter now. Then he left before the thought could finish forming. A few hours passed, and Nichole stayed in the house. She texted Eva twice, then deleted one of the messages before sending it. I don't want to make Tristan any angrier than he already is. Maybe staying here really is better. Eva's reply came back almost immediately. That sentence sounds deeply suspicious, but fine. Stay alive. Also hydrate. Nichole was still staring at the screen when the doorbell rang. Her whole body tightened. For one stupid second she thought Tristan was back already. Then she remembered he wouldn't ring his own bell, and that made the pulse under her skin change shape entirely. She crossed the foyer and checked the side window before opening it. The security man was posted at the drive, standing with his hands loose at his sides. She opened the door. Jane Curtis stood there like trouble dressed for lunch. A fitted dark dress, mouth painted, hair immaculate, sunglasses pushed up into glossy black waves. She looked ready for a boardroom, a cocktail bar, or someone else's husband. Probably all three. Nichole's eyes moved past her to the guard at the gate. He hadn't moved, hadn't stopped her, hadn't even turned his head, and Nichole had absolutely no idea how this woman kept finding her way to the front door. "Why are you here, Jane?" Jane's smile arrived right on schedule. "Darling, I came to check on you." Her gaze traveled over Nichole's bare legs, oversized shirt, bare feet, and settled there with that polished softness that never meant anything good. "I'm coming from the hospital. Your father looked stable." Nichole's shoulders dropped before she could stop them. "You saw him?" "I did." Jane stepped inside without being invited, looking around as if she had every right, her handbag swinging once at her side. "You didn't go today?" Nichole shut the door with more force than was strictly necessary. "The doctor said I can only visit twice a week." Jane gave a small, sympathetic tilt of her head that somehow made everything worse. "Of course. Sometimes you do have to know when to push and when not to." Her eyes drifted back to Nichole's face. "But you're still learning the uglier parts of life, I suppose?" Nichole looked slowly at the hem of Jane's dress, then back up. "A tragic gap in my education. I've clearly never committed to the kind of wardrobe that builds character." That got a laugh out of Jane. She wandered farther into the foyer, let her hand trail lightly over the banister, and glanced around the house with the ease of someone revisiting a place they knew well. "So," her tone turned almost playful, "how is the little domestic arrangement going?" Nichole folded her arms. "Oh, beautifully. Tristan is a dream husband. Very gentle, extremely emotionally available. We spend hours talking about our future." Jane laughed harder at that, which only made Nichole want to slap her. Then Jane stopped in the middle of the foyer and turned back with a small theatrical wince. "Actually, that reminds me. I left a few things here." Nichole went still. Jane was already moving toward the stairs. "In Tristan's room," she added over one shoulder, smiling. Nichole's hand found the newel post at the bottom of the stairs and gripped it, Then she went up after her. By the time she reached the bedroom, Jane was at Tristan's bedside table with one drawer already open. Nichole stopped in the doorway and crossed her arms, every line of her body locked tight while she watched the other woman go through the drawer as if memory lived there and belonged to her. Ah! Jane lifted something delicate between two fingers. There it is. A bracelet. Then, with a second glance into the drawer, she pulled out a scrap of lace and dropped it into her handbag with the same careless ease. The blood left her face. Jane looked around the room once more, satisfied, then crossed toward her in the measured tap of high heels that sounded designed to humiliate. She stopped close enough for perfume to land first. Don't worry. The words came lightly, almost kindly. I won't interrupt the little marriage game while you're playing house. One shoulder lifted. After that, Tristan and I can continue wherever we left off. Jane started downstairs. Nichole followed, one hand tight on the railing. By the time they reached the foyer, Jane had her hand on the door. One more thing, Nichole said. Jane turned. Nichole stood in the center of the hall, barefoot, furious, swimming in Tristan's oversized shirt. Don't come back here. Her voice sharpened with every word. This is my home. He's my husband. Stay away from him. Something shifted in Jane's face then. Not offense, not surprise. Her chin lifted a fraction, and her eyes warmed in a way that was worse than contempt. Oh, sweetheart. Her gaze moved over Nichole the way you look at something that doesn't quite belong. When your father wakes up, or doesn't, Tristan will put you right back where you came from. She tilted her head, almost sympathetic. Get used to it. She opened the door and left without looking back. The door shut behind her. Nichole stood very still for half a second. Then she let out a sharp breath through her nose and looked toward the staircase as if Tristan might somehow be standing there, irritating and perfect and immediately available to punish. You really let her leave things in your drawer, she muttered. She turned toward the hall mirror, caught sight of herself, flushed, furious, barefoot, swimming in his shirt, and jabbed a finger at her own reflection. No, I'm not crying over Jane Curtis. By the time she turned away from the mirror, her mouth had set into a shape Tristan would have recognized instantly and disliked on principle. "Ooh," she said to the empty house. "Now, I really want to annoy you, Tristan Oswald." Nichole called Eva first. "Come get me in 30 minutes. Eva didn't waste time on hello. "That sounds illegal already." "Good." Nichole was already heading for the stairs. "Be here." She ended the call and pulled up Holloway's number before she reached the landing. "I'll be there in an hour," she said. "This meeting stays confidential. Not Tristan, not anyone." Holloway was quiet for a moment. "Understood, Miss Lawrence." She hung up and stood in front of the closet. The clothes Tristan had sent over were summer things, florals, soft cotton, pale fabrics that belonged to a version of this week she no longer lived in. She pushed through them quickly. Then her hand stopped on something red. She pulled it free and held it up. Jane's dress moved through her mind before she could stop it. The dark wrap, the hemline, all that careful effort. Her first thought was quick and honest. "I need to go shopping." She looked at the red dress in her hands for another second, then put it on, not like Jane, but not like someone who hadn't noticed Jane either. Half an hour later she was in Eva's passenger seat, belt on, hair up, red dress on. Eva glanced sideways at her, then at the phone in her lap. "You've been on that screen for 10 straight minutes. Trying to turn off the tracking." Nichole didn't look up. Eva watched her for a second. "That's going to make him insane." She was still watching the screen when she answered. "That is exactly what I want." Eva looked at her properly then. "Oh," she said. "Good. I want him furious." Her eyes stayed on the windshield. "I want him distracted. I want him to feel what it's like when somebody else decides what happens to him." Eva nodded once and pressed harder on the gas. Holloway was already waiting when they arrived. A quiet corner table in the lounge of one of the older Hamptons hotels, the kind of place that had learned to keep its conversations private. Silver-haired, unhurried, already reading her face with the patience of someone who had spent 30 years in rooms where people were either honest or very well rehearsed. He stood when she walked in, shook her hand, and waited until they sat. Eva stayed by the door. Nichole sat across from him, spine straight, hands flat against the arms of the chair. "Tristan is not coming into this room," she said. "Neither is anyone else who thinks they get to manage it for me." Holloway said nothing. She held his eyes. "I want to block Naomi's petition before it gets anywhere near a courtroom." My father's Lawrence Group authority, my personal accounts, my right to make decisions while he can't make his. Holloway leaned back and regarded her with something very close to approval. You are a determined young woman. Nichole didn't smile. Yes. That almost drew one from him. All right. He opened the legal pad. This is what we do. He lifted one finger as he spoke. First, the legal status your marriage gives you. Independent married beneficiary. That cuts the ground out from under any claim that you're still a minor heir under family supervision. A second finger. Second, an independent medical evaluation from a neutral board, not your father's doctors, not Naomi's people. Once they certify that your diabetes does not impair your judgment, the incompetence argument loses its teeth entirely. Third, a third joined them. Formal notification to the Lawrence Group Board that all financial and administrative authority connected to your name remains in your hands. Any attempt to freeze or transfer those rights gets contested immediately. Nichole listened without moving. Her shoulders dropped a fraction. The only thing that showed. Her mouth curved then. Not softly, not sweetly, the first real smile of the day. Good. She leaned forward and placed both palms on the table. And remember, you are my father's lawyer and mine. No one else gets information. No one. Holloway met her gaze. Agreed. Nichole sat back and left the silence to him. Her phone lit up on the table between them. Tristan. She turned it face down without looking away from Holloway. Where do we begin? In the basement of Tristan's building, under a fluorescent light that kept threatening to die and never quite did, Sam sat tied to a metal chair with blood drying under his nose. Tristan stood with his back to him, one hand on the edge of the steel table. The muscle along his jaw was moving. He was aware of it. He let it. Somewhere deeper in the building, a pipe knocked inside the wall. He turned. Talk. The word came low. Who helped you move the shooter, and where did you put him? Sam lifted his head slowly. His mouth was split, one eye beginning to swell, the damage doing nothing useful to his expression. If anything, it had sharpened the arrogance in him. A crooked smile touched the corner of his mouth. I'd rather talk about Nichole. Tristan's mouth shifted. Something that looked almost like amusement, if you didn't know him well enough to recognize danger wearing a smile. This is your strategy? The words came out, almost bored. Sam gave one careless shrug. Maybe. He let his gaze travel over Tristan's face with ugly curiosity. Tell me something. Were your eyes always on her, or did that happen later? Tristan came closer, his voice dropping a register. It's a poor one. Sam laughed softly through the blood in his mouth. Is it? He tipped his head. From where I'm sitting, she seems to matter quite a lot. Tristan stopped an arm's length from him. Sam saw the stillness and mistook it for restraint he could keep testing. You know what I remember? His voice dropped lower, more intimate on purpose. Last summer, the first night she opened her legs for me. The punch landed before the sentence finished. Chair legs scraped hard across concrete. Sam's head snapped sideways. Blood hit the floor in a dark, bright line. Sam laughed, not because it didn't hurt, but because it had, and he wanted Tristan to know the difference. He turned his face back slowly, and the smile he gave Tristan was so full of contempt it made the room feel smaller. His voice dropped to something almost gentle. You didn't know? Tristan's hand flexed once at his side. I still remember the sound she made. The second punch drove the chair back hard enough to shriek against the concrete. One of Tristan's men stepped forward. Boss! Tristan did not look at him. His breathing had changed, not faster, worse. The kind of breath a man takes when he's holding violence on a leash, and the leash is beginning to burn through his hand. The quiet was the signal, not the punches, not the blood, not the chair scraping across concrete, the quiet. He rolled his sleeves once, slow and controlled. When he spoke, there was no heat in it, which was worse than if there had been. Say her name one more time. You leave this room missing things you'd like to keep. Sam spat blood onto the floor and grinned through it. That sounded personal. The guard came in close then, bent to Tristan's ear, and spoke low enough that Sam couldn't hear the words. Whatever the guard said, it moved through Tristan's face like weather, fast and total. The violence in him didn't disappear, it redirected. "What do you mean you lost her?" The words came out stripped of everything except the question itself. Tristan's tongue moved once across his teeth, eyes fixed on the middle distance. She had turned off the tracking. He had taught her exactly how. He was already turning away. By the time he reached the door, his phone was in his hand. He called her once. No answer. Called again and got nothing but the sound of a line ringing out into silence. He had not expected to feel this way. By the third call, the fluorescent light was still buzzing overhead. Sam was still bleeding onto the floor, and Tristan was already gone. By the time the shopping bags were in the back of Eva's car, Nichole was wearing one of the new dresses. Satin, beige gold in the late light, cut on the bias so it moved when she did and clung when she stopped. Ava looked her over once. "That dress is stylish and sexy and genuinely dangerous on you." She pulled away from the curb. "Very, very good call." "It's a weapon," Nichole said. "There's a difference." Something shifted in her face. She turned in her seat. "I don't want to go back to the house. Call the guys. Jeff, Liam, let's build a fire on the beach." Eva's eyebrows rose. "Whoa, the lawyer move wasn't enough? You actually want him to lose his mind? Just call them." Then quieter, with the edge still underneath it. "I need to think about something else for an hour, otherwise I'm going to lose mine." Eva kept her eyes on the road. "I don't have a home right now. My father is in a hospital bed. Nobody feels safe. Nobody feels simple." Her throat tightened, but she kept going. "I'm honestly amazed I'm still standing." Eva reached across the console without a word, squeezed her wrist once, then picked up her phone and made the calls. An hour later, a fire was burning on the stretch of beach below Tristan's house. Jeff and Liam were already there with a cooler and bottles, exactly as every Hamptons summer had trained them to be. Nichole had her bare feet buried in the cool sand, the satin catching the firelight every time she shifted. Jeff was sitting close to her, close enough that their shoulders were almost touching, his eyes returning to her face more often than he probably realized. He leaned forward across the fire. "He's 15 years older than you." His voice had the particular strained patience of someone who had been holding a thought back for a while. "I still can't actually believe you married him." Liam tilted his bottle. "And a little terrifying, if we're being honest. 2 summers ago, I saw him at a bar with his hand around some guy's throat. Had him up against the wall, like it was nothing." Eva cut in. "Okay, come on. Tristan isn't always like that." She glanced at Nichole. "She's known him since she was a kid. It's different." Nichole said nothing. The flames moved in her eyes. A gust came off the water, colder than the last. She shivered and pulled her arms across herself. Jeff was already pulling off his sweater. "Here, wear this. You're freezing." She took it. The knit was warm from his body. She tugged it over her head, and when her hair caught inside the collar, Jeff reached out and drew the strands free with both hands, careful and unhurried. His fingers stilled for just a second at her shoulder. Warm, deliberate, a breath too long. And then a voice cut through the fire, through the wind, through everything. "Get your hands off my wife." Everything stopped. Jeff turned first, then Liam, then Ava. Nichole kept her eyes on the fire. For one moment she only sat there looking into the fire, the faintest smile touching the corner of her mouth before she let it go. Then she turned her head. Tristan was coming down the sand fast, sleeves rolled, 3 buttons of his shirt open, eyes lit with something that made even Jeff forget how to stand up straight. The firelight moved across his jaw, his shoulders, the hard, deliberate line of him. Her eyes dropped to his hands, to the raw red across his knuckles that hadn't been there this morning. She opened her mouth. "What's happening, Tristan?" He reached her before she finished, one arm under her knees, the other around her back, and then she was off the ground entirely. "Let me go!" She pushed at his shoulder hard. Jeff lurched to his feet. Liam followed with a startled, "Hey!" Tristan turned his head once. That look was enough. Neither of them moved again. He turned to Eva then, and the anger on his face had gone colder. "Even you, Eva." Eva's mouth opened and didn't close. Then Tristan was walking, Nichole in his arms, the house coming closer with every step. "What do you think you're doing?" Her voice came out tight and furious. "You humiliated me in front of my friends." He didn't look at her. His jaw was set, his eyes on the path ahead. "We'll talk about this at home, Nichole." The words came out even, controlled. "You haven't been well behaved today. I'll decide what to do with you when we get inside." Her lips parted. She pressed them together. God, she thought. Should I be frightened? The terrace steps appeared ahead. His arms were tight around her. She could feel the warmth of his skin through his shirt, the tension in him that hadn't loosened once since he walked off that beach. Every nerve ending she had was on fire, and it had nothing to do with fear. Tristan didn't put her down until they were inside. The front door shut behind them with a heavy final sound. For 1 second, neither of them moved. Then he lowered her to her feet, and his eyes went at once to the sweater still hanging off her shoulders, and hardened. That thing doesn't smell like you. The words came low, controlled, but there was nothing calm in them. It smells like a man fragrance. Nichole lifted her chin. Yes, Jeff's. Tristan swallowed. The movement was small. She saw it anyway. Take it off. A slow, angry smile touched her mouth. So this was how tonight was going to be. Good. She hooked her fingers into the sweater and pulled it over her head in one sharp motion, then let it fall to the floor between them. The satin underneath caught the hallway light at once. Soft, gold beige, thin straps, a low neckline, silk skimming every line of her body instead of hiding it. Tristan took a breath. It took him too long to let it out. His eyes stayed on her for one dangerous second before he forced them elsewhere. What exactly do you think you're doing? Nichole took one step toward him. Her expression was almost insolent now, though she could feel her heart climbing hard against her ribs. I got tired of sitting in this house. I missed my friends. I went shopping. Another step. They were too close already. You do not get to keep me here like I'm under house arrest. His eyes dropped once to the dress and came back to her face. You bought that today? She let her hands drift over the satin, deliberately slow, feeling the fabric slide under her palms. Yes. Her voice softened in a way she knew would annoy him more. It's beautiful, isn't it? Look at it. Her fingers traced the line of the dress at her waist. It moves like it's not even there. Tristan's throat worked again. One brow lifted, and when he spoke the words came out low and rough at the edges. Did Jeff get to feel that? Nichole tipped her head, her voice dropping into something softer and more deliberate. This is not a real marriage, Tristan. Did you forget that? She held his gaze as she let the next part land, slow and careful. I have needs too. She turned as if to walk away. He caught her by the wrist and drove her back against the wall before she had time to take a second step, and the breath left her on impact. One of his hands pinned her at the waist, not crushing, just absolute, more than enough to keep her there. Don't push me tonight, Nichole. Her chest was rising too fast now. She could feel the heat of him everywhere, through the satin, through the thin strip of air between them, through the rough control he was holding on with by force alone. Tristan looked 1 inch from losing that control completely, and the sight of it sent a reckless pulse straight through her. Then his eyes changed. What was in his eyes wasn't jealousy anymore. It was something with no patience left in it. He looked at her for one suspended second, jaw tight, and when he spoke again the question came out rougher than before, as if it had already done damage on the way up. Did something happen with Sam? Nichole blinked. What? He didn't move away. You heard me. His voice had dropped lower, but it was worse for that. Did he touch you? For a second she was too stunned to answer. Then anger came back fast. Do I ask what the hell you and Jane were doing in your bedroom? His brows pulled together. What are you talking about? But she had gone too far to stop now. Sam is an idiot. The words came quicker now, meaner, more reckless by the second. But his hands, a woman could lose her mind over them. She lifted her own hand to the side of her neck and let her fingertips travel down slowly, watching Tristan's face the whole time. I'm not a little girl anymore. Of course I like being touched in ways that make my body shake. Then she arched into him. Only slightly, only enough. She put her lips close to his ear and let the words leave her in a whisper. And Sam? He uses his lips very well. She was still close enough to feel his breath when he moved. For 1 second, he just looked at her, jaw tight, chest rising, the last of his control burning off like paper. Then his mouth came down on hers. There was nothing gentle about it. The kiss landed hard, the kind that skips every preamble and arrives already certain of itself. His mouth took hers with brutal hunger, and the sound that broke from her was not a protest. Her fingers found his hair instantly, and when he kissed her again, deeper, rougher, as if jealousy had finally burned through the last of his control. The whole world narrowed to heat, breath, and the violent shock of being wanted exactly this much. Neither of them breathed. Then Tristan slammed one hand against the wall beside her head and tore himself back. He turned away so abruptly it looked like it cost him something. "Go upstairs." The words came out stripped and rough. "I'm furious with you." His jaw worked once, his back still to her. "And I don't want to hurt you." Nichole stood against the wall with her fingers pressed to her own mouth. Tristan Oswald had kissed her. Not carefully. Not by accident. Not like a man who didn't know what he was doing. He had kissed her as if the thought of Sam touching her had scraped something raw inside him, and this had been the only answer his body knew. But something was wrong. The heat of it was still burning through her, and still it felt off, unsteady, dangerous in the wrong way. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. Not like this, not out of anger and jealousy and a dare she'd thrown at him like a weapon. "Nichole!" His voice came sharper, the restraint thinning at the edges. "Go!" She turned and took the stairs. At the top, she stopped with one hand on the railing. But she had pushed too far, and now she was standing at the top of his stairs, with his kiss still burning on her mouth, trying to figure out what she'd actually done. Below, the hallway was silent. Tristan hadn't moved. Nichole sat on the edge of the bed with both hands locked together between her knees. The room was quiet, but it didn't feel quiet. It felt charged, as if the walls had held on to what had happened downstairs and sent it up after her in pieces. She stared at the floorboards for a long moment, then dragged a hand through her hair and muttered under her breath, "Oh God, I went too far." Downstairs, Tristan poured himself a glass of whiskey. He didn't sit. He stood by the window with one hand braced against the frame, the city lights breaking against the glass, and threw the drink back too fast to taste it. His other hand went through his hair and stayed there for a second, fingers spread at the back of his neck. "What the hell did I do?" The words came out low enough that the room barely heard them. He reached for the bottle again. Not because he wanted more whiskey, but because he wanted something to burn through the memory of her mouth, the heat of her skin, the sound she had made when he kissed her. None of it left. That was the problem. He shouldn't have touched her. He knew that. By the time Nichole came downstairs, she had changed into an oversized sweatshirt and soft shorts, but her mouth was still pink from the kiss, and her hair still looked as if his hands had been in it. She stopped a few feet behind him. Tristan noticed at once. She could tell by the way his shoulders shifted, barely, just enough, but he kept his back to her, eyes on the dark glass in front of him. Nichole spoke first, her voice quieter now. "Nothing ever happened with Sam." She waited. "I hate him. He never touched me." She looked down at her hands. "And nothing happened with Jeff either." At that, Tristan turned. She was standing in the middle of the room with her arms loose at her sides, looking younger in the sweatshirt and more honest in it too. "But Jane came by today." Her eyes dropped for a second. "She said she'd left things here." She hated this part enough that he could see it before she finished saying it. "She took a bracelet out of your drawer, and—" Her mouth tightened. "A pair of underwear." Tristan stared at her. "Jane doesn't have anything in my room." The words came flat and certain. "She played you." Nichole looked at the floorboards. Her teeth found her lower lip. "I thought you were still seeing her." The disbelief on his face lasted half a second before something harder came in under it. "We were never a thing." The words came flat, stripped of any warmth. "I never touched that woman. She isn't my type." His jaw tightened. "Why are we even talking about this? There are bigger things, Nichole." She lifted her eyes. He was still holding the whiskey glass. Her gaze dropped to his hand and stopped there. The skin over his knuckles split and dark. She crossed the room before either of them could think better of it and took his hand carefully, turning it toward the light. Her thumb stayed against the torn skin at one knuckle, then another. "Did you hit someone?" Her thumb pressed lightly against the darkest knuckle. He let her hold his hand. "Sam." Her eyes came up to his. "Because he said I slept with him." Tristan's throat worked. "For the shooter's location." Nichole's face warmed anyway, and she could feel him notice before she looked away. "I have to go." His voice had steadied, but it still sounded tired underneath. "I'm not locking you in." He glanced at her. "Stay inside." She nodded once. "I won't leave." He moved toward the door, and only when he had one hand on it did he stop, his back to her. Nichole. Her breath caught on the answer before it left her. What? He stood there for 1 second too long. About earlier. His voice had gone quieter, and somehow that made it worse. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. Then he walked out. The door shut behind him with the same heavy, final sound it always made. Nichole didn't move. A second later, a tear slipped free before she could stop it. She wiped it away angrily with the heel of her hand. What if I wanted it to happen again? Nichole fell asleep that night without meaning to. When Tristan came back just before dawn, the house was dark and quiet. He moved through it without turning on any lights, jacket over one shoulder, carrying the kind of tired that lived behind the eyes and didn't leave with sleep. He still slowed at her door. He pushed it open just enough to look in. She was asleep on her side, one hand tucked beneath her cheek, hair spread loose over the pillow. The sight of her hit him harder than it should have. Something low in his stomach tightened at once, and the fact that he noticed it only made it worse. He should have left. He knew that. He had started to pull the door closed when her voice reached him, blurred by sleep. Tristan. He crossed the room without deciding to. I'm here. The words came low. I'm back. Nichole shifted under the sheets, her eyes not quite open, her voice still thick with sleep. When you're not here, I can't sleep. Tristan sat on the edge of the bed and brushed his hand through her hair once, carefully. As if gentleness needed precision with her. She made a small sound and turned toward him. I had a nightmare, she murmured. I was drowning again. You weren't there. My dad wasn't there either. Her hand found his wrist in the dark and held on. Don't leave me alone. For a moment he stayed, caught between standing and staying. Then Nichole shifted closer and lowered her head into his lap, still asleep enough not to know what she was doing. And that settled it. He stayed where he was. He was sitting there with one hand moving slowly through her hair, feeling the warmth of her, the soft weight of her, the clean, familiar scent of her skin. Her breathing settled by degrees. Outside, the sky kept lightening. At some point, his head tipped back against the headboard. Control, just control. Then even that slipped, and he fell asleep with his hand still in her hair. When Nichole woke the next morning, Tristan was gone. For one confused second, she registered only the dent in the mattress beside her and the faint warmth that had already started to leave it. Then she sat up and found the note on the bedside table. We found the shooter. Sam talked. I'm out of town today. Below that, in the same clipped hand, you know what I need from you. Nichole bit her lower lip. I know, she murmured to the empty room. I'm sorry. She left her phone on the nightstand, face down next to his note, and went to get dressed. Eva's car was already at the curb when she came out. Nichole got in, pulled the door shut, and didn't look back at the house. You sure about this? Eva asked, pulling away from the curb. Nichole watched it disappear in the side mirror. Take me to the helipad. Nichole had been in New York for 2 hours by the time Holloway got her the report. By the time they stepped out of the hospital, it was already in his briefcase. On the front steps, Holloway shook her hand. Smart move, Nichole. Tomorrow, at the board meeting, you put this on the table. He didn't over-explain it, and she didn't need him to. The independent panel had found no cognitive impairment, no compromised judgment, and no medical basis for Naomi's claim that Nichole was incapable of managing her own affairs, which meant Naomi's petition had just lost its teeth. A slow smile came to Nichole's mouth. The corner of Holloway's eyes creased, the closest he got to humor. If you decide to get clever and end up on Naomi's side, she said, Tristan will destroy you. I'm experienced enough to know who I work for, young lady. Nichole gave one small nod. By the time the helicopter lifted for the Hamptons, she checked her watch and winced. 5 hours. No phone, no tracker, no way for Tristan to reach her. She looked down at the report in her lap, then out at the coastline darkening below. Her thumb moved once across the edge of the folder. She had done the right thing. She was fairly sure of that. What she wasn't sure of was how to explain it to a man who'd spent the last 5 hours unable to find her, and who was, on a good day, already difficult. It was going to be a very long night. By the time Nichole stepped off the helicopter, the light over the Hamptons had gone pale and flat, the kind of evening light that made every house look more expensive and every thought feel a little sharper. The taxi pulled up to the house. She went straight inside. Her phone was where she'd left it on the kitchen counter. She picked it up. 2 missed calls from Tristan. 2 calls in 6 hours. Not exactly the behavior of a man spiraling into devastation. The thought almost amused her. Almost, because beneath it sat the harder question. Where he was now, what the shooter had told him, and how she was supposed to explain half a day with no phone and no tracker. She was still standing there when it rang again. Unknown number, hospital prefix. Everything in her dropped at once. "Miss Lawrence?" The voice was brisk, urgent. "Your father's condition has worsened. You should come immediately." She was out the door before the call ended. She tried Tristan twice in the elevator, both times straight to voicemail. She typed fast, "Going to hospital. Dad's worse," shoved the phone into her pocket and ran. Every red light on the way in looked personal. Every slow turn felt malicious. The private floor was quiet when she stepped off the elevator, too quiet for an emergency. The nurse at the desk looked up without alarm. The attending doctor came toward her with an expression that wasn't grief and wasn't urgency. "We didn't contact you," he said. "Your father is stable. There's been no change." Nichole's hand tightened around her phone. The hallway was too clean, too still. Then who called? She already knew. Someone had not wanted her informed. Someone had wanted her moved. She tried Tristan again, straight to silence. When she turned toward the elevators, the fear in her had changed shape. Less panic, more calculation, more anger. The doors slid open, and the light hit her first. White, blinding, the kind that came from a dozen cameras firing at once. She had half a second to register the crowd before the questions were already on her, overlapping, insistent, closing in from every direction. "Miss Lawrence, is it true you married Tristan Oswald? Were you forced into the marriage? Did he threaten you?" Nichole kept moving, head down, pulse loud in her ears. Then, beyond the flashing lights, she saw Naomi standing several feet back in a pale coat, a small, satisfied smile on her mouth like she had ordered the scene and it had arrived on time. The thought arrived before she could stop it. "You witch." Nichole had exactly 1 second to decide what to do. Then a hand closed around hers. Tristan was moving through the crowd. Dark suit, jaw set, looking expensive and furious and entirely unwilling to let any of this continue a second longer. He reached her side, laced his fingers through hers and turned once toward the cameras. "Leave my wife alone." The words came flat and clipped, leaving no room. "These claims are false." Naomi stepped closer. Her mouth moved near Tristan's ear. "Where is my son?" Tristan didn't look at her. "On his way to custody." His jaw tightened once. "You'll follow." Nichole felt her spine straighten on its own. She stepped half a pace forward and lifted her voice. "I'll take a few questions." The noise dropped. "I married Tristan Oswald of my own free will." She kept her voice level, the voice she'd watched her father use in boardrooms her whole life. "These allegations are false." She turned her head and looked at Tristan directly. "I'm in love with him." He went very still beside her. She held his gaze for 1 second, then turned back. "My father knew about our relationship and supported it. At tomorrow's board meeting, we'll be addressing how the company moves forward while he recovers. The company is secure." She let the professional smile settle on her face. "Now, if you'll excuse us, I'd like to go home with my husband." The crowd began to part. Naomi was staring at her with an expression she hadn't worn before. Not calculation, not amusement. Surprise. Tristan was looking at Nichole with something quieter than surprise and much more dangerous. Then the corner of his mouth moved. "You heard my wife." His gaze crossed the cameras one final time. "Clear the way." They walked through the crowd together. When the noise finally dropped behind them, he leaned close enough that his words reached only her. "You were magnificent." The words came low, almost rough, very convincing. Nichole smiled without looking at him. "Glad I could impress you." His hand didn't let go. Tristan drove with one hand on the wheel and the faintest trace of a smile still touching his mouth. Nichole noticed it almost immediately. Streetlights kept sliding over his face and then away again, catching that expression in fragments. There, gone, there again, until it finally annoyed her enough to ask, "What?" He didn't look at her right away. The smile stayed exactly where it was. "I'm trying to figure out who that woman was back there." His eyes flicked to hers for a second, then to the road again. "Was that really you, He stopped himself. "Nichole?" She pressed her lips together to keep from smiling too broadly, smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from her dress, and failed anyway. "Glad you finally got to meet her." She kept her voice easy. "Also, your dimples look good on you when you smile, even if we barely ever see them." That got his eyes back on her. The smile deepened a fraction. He said nothing. He didn't need to. By the time they got home, the silence between them had gone warm instead of sharp. Nichole reached for his hand the moment they were inside. The knuckles were still raw under the hallway light, split at 2 joints, the skin dark and tightened. "Let me." She came back from the bathroom with antiseptic cream and cotton pads. Tristan leaned against the kitchen island while she stood between him and the counter, head bent over his hand, working the ointment in with careful fingers. He didn't flinch. He didn't look anywhere except at her. The kitchen was quiet enough that she could hear the soft drag of her own thumb over his knuckles. "My dad." She didn't look up at first. "He would have been happy I was with you, if this marriage were real." The next part came more quietly. "I think he would have been happy." That made Tristan go still in a different way. "You don't know me that well, Nichole." She looked up. "Clearly neither do you." Her voice was steady. "I think you forget I'm a Lawrence." He held her gaze. She looked back down and caught the ring still on his finger, the same one he'd worn since their wedding morning. Even now, even when no one was looking. Something in her chest pulled tight at the sight of it. He watched her notice the ring. She could feel him watching her notice it. When she finished, he laid his other hand over hers for 1 second. "Thank you." He pushed away from the island. "I'll need today's performance again tomorrow. Get some rest." He moved toward the stairs, unhurried, each step deliberate. She stood there with the cream still cool on her fingers, watching him go. "You're running from me, Tristan Oswald." Then, after another second, with the corner of her mouth turning upward as the truth settled in, "Because I get under your skin." A few hours later, she was sitting at the edge of the pool in her bikini, with her feet in the water. Night had come down fully. The underwater lights turned the pool a deep turquoise, almost unreal, and the surface caught the glow like moving glass. The house behind her was mostly dark. The ocean beyond it was only sound. When Tristan came out in his swim trunks with a towel over one shoulder, he stopped the moment he saw her. "I thought you never went near the water." Nichole smiled at the water instead of him. "I thought maybe I could get in if you were here." Then she lifted her head. "Will you help me get over it?" He swallowed. She saw that too. Without a word, he stripped off the towel and dove in. Clean, immediate, no hesitation. He surfaced farther out, turned, and swam back toward her in a smooth backward stroke until he reached the edge below where she was sitting. "Come here." He opened his arms. Nichole took one breath, then slid forward and let herself drop. His hands caught her at the waist at once. She wrapped her arms around his neck without thinking. Her chin was up as if none of this frightened her, but the tension was still there in her eyes, in how she held herself a little too tight. "I've got you." The words came low, close to her ear. "I know," she murmured. "You always do." Something changed in his face at that. Not enough for someone who didn't know him. More than enough for her. His gaze had gone softer, less guarded, and now she could see what the control was holding back. His arms shifted slightly beneath her. When he spoke, his voice had dropped to something rougher than usual. "I'm going to let go slowly." Her arms tightened around his neck. "I don't want you to. I'm fine, right here." He held her eyes for one suspended second, understood exactly what she meant, and pretended not to. "Then how are you supposed to get past it?" His voice had dropped lower. "I'm right here. You're safe." He loosened his grip little by little, Nichole dipped and grabbed for his forearm on instinct. And they both laughed, hers breathless, his rougher and warmer than she was used to hearing. Their wet shoulders were nearly touching. Neither of them moved apart. Water moved around them in soft, cool ripples that had nothing to do with the heat climbing through her skin. Nichole reached up and pressed one fingertip to his dimple. His whole body went still under the touch. "Everyone believed you today." His voice had dropped into something low and careful. "Where did you learn to perform like that?" So it was a performance. She tilted her head. "Tell me then, which of us is the better actor? The one who said she was in love, or the one pretending he feels nothing?" Tristan's chin lifted slightly. That was answer enough. She could read him now. The want in him, the effort it was costing him to keep it held back, the fact that he was standing in water up to his waist, with her body pressed to his, while everything narrowed to skin and breath and a choice. Nichole let her lips graze his jaw, barely. "I know what I feel." Her whisper landed close. "And I'm ready to risk everything." She pulled back just enough to see his face. "Tristan, are you going to keep running?" For 1 second he just looked at her, jaw tight, water moving around his shoulders, the last of his control burning off his face like paper in heat. Then his hands closed around her hips. He drove her back against the side of the pool and his mouth came down on hers. Not careful, not restrained, nothing left of the man who'd been holding himself back for days. She gasped against him. Her legs came around his waist on instinct, and the shift pressed her fully against him. The hard evidence of exactly what she did to him unmistakable against her skin. He wanted her enough to shake. "Not here," he breathed against her mouth. She turned her lips to his ear. "Exactly right here." Her voice dropped softer. "The first place I ever saw you, in the water." Tristan's head tipped back, a rough exhale leaving him. "You drive me insane, Nichole." His hand closed over her waist and pulled her tighter. His mouth moved to her throat, and the sound that left her disappeared into the dark open air above the pool. A few hours later, the room was dark and quiet. Nichole was curled against his chest, listening to the slowed rhythm of his breathing. His hand was moving over the curve of her hip, then higher, then back again, slow now, unhurried in the quiet that came after. As if he still couldn't quite believe the night had ended here, his lips came close to her ear. "Nichole Lawrence." The words came rough around the edges, barely above a whisper. "Will you stay with me for the rest of my life?" His hand stilled in her hair. "Will you marry me?" She smiled before he'd finished the sentence, properly, the kind she couldn't arrange or control. "I finally got a real proposal." She laughed under her breath, warm and sleepy and full. "I've wanted to marry you since I was 11 years old." Her fingers traced his shoulder. "Did you really think I was ever going to give up being Mrs. Oswald that easily?" That smile came back to his mouth again. This time she felt it before she saw it. He kissed her, slower now, murmuring against her lips. "I should have realized by now. Once you decide you want something, nothing is getting away from you." The air in Lawrence Group's boardroom ran cold against the August heat pressing at the glass outside. Engineered calm, the kind that made the space feel like a sealed argument before anyone had spoken a word. At the head of the table, Kane Lawrence's empty chair sat like a monument no one had dared move. Naomi had spread her temporary control documents across the polished wood, as if ownership were a matter of posture and timing. In white, she looked almost ceremonial. Only her smile gave her away. Jane Curtis stood beside her with a stack of files gathered neatly in both hands, polished and composed and watchful in the particular way of women who had survived for years by appearing useful while counting exits. No one in the room was relaxed. Then the doors opened. Nichole walked in first, black, nothing soft about it. A clean, structured dress that said nothing about softness and everything about where she intended to sit before the morning was over. Behind her came Tristan in a dark suit, controlled as always, his presence changing the room before he'd spoken a word. Naomi looked Nichole over from head to toe with open contempt. "Nichole, darling, this meeting is for adults." Her fingers tapped the edge of the petition in front of her. My conservatorship filing is already before the court, and by the end of today, the temporary control of this company will be where it belongs." Nichole didn't answer immediately. She walked toward her father's chair. Tristan moved ahead just enough to pull it back for her, and before she sat, she dropped a thick file onto the table, hard enough to make 2 board members flinch. "You're wrong, Naomi." Her voice was cold enough to quiet the room all by itself. "Your petition was denied this morning." She pushed the first page toward the center of the table. "Independent medical board findings. My diabetes does not impair my judgment. I am fully competent, fully capable, and fully authorized to manage my own affairs." She met Naomi's gaze. "You have nothing." Naomi's smile loosened. Not much, but enough. Tristan's eyes settled on Nichole and stayed there. He had known about the report. The calm in her face, though, made it obvious she wasn't finished, that she had something bigger still in reserve. The screen at the far end of the room lit up. Nobody touched the controls. Every head turned. For one brief second, all anyone saw was the sterile glow of a hospital feed. Then Kane Lawrence appeared on the screen, propped up in bed, paler than usual but unmistakably himself, gaze clear, presence immediate. "What," he asked, looking around the room with visible displeasure, "made any of you think this meeting should begin without me?" Silence hit hard. Naomi went still. Jane's fingers tightened around the files in her hands. Kane's eyes moved first to Naomi, then to Jane, and there was nothing weak in how he looked at either of them. "Sam gave a full statement to the police this morning, including the part where Jane helped create that 9-minute security gap on Naomi's instruction." His gaze locked on Jane. "Tristan warned me someone close to me was compromised. The night I was shot, you were the only one standing beside me." Jane's folder slipped from her hands and hit the floor, and she left it there. Nichole felt the force of her father's presence settle into the room like a second architecture, stronger than the glass, stronger than the polished table, stronger than Naomi's last bluff. She took the second file from her folder and laid it down with deliberate care. "And now for the part you really weren't expecting." Naomi tore her eyes off the screen. Nichole met the look head-on. "My father signed a sealed succession protocol months before he was hospitalized. In the event of incapacity, all voting rights, signature authority, and executive control transfer directly to me, immediately and without condition." She let that land. "As of this morning, I am the acting head of Lawrence Group." The board members looked at each other, and then at the table, and for a long moment no one moved or spoke. Nichole felt Tristan go still beside her. The stillness of a man who had just been genuinely surprised for perhaps the first time she had ever witnessed it. She could feel him looking at her with the particular quality of attention that meant he was recalibrating everything. And she kept her eyes on the screen. She had not only defended herself, she had taken the throne. On the screen, Kane looked at her with something fierce and tired and deeply proud. "That," he said, "is how a Lawrence fights?" Then his gaze shifted to Tristan. "And you?" His voice went level. "You and I are going to have a separate conversation, Oswald. I asked you to protect my daughter, not marry her." Tristan gave a single nod. No argument, no excuse, and in its own way that said more than a defense would have. The doors opened again. This time it was the police. 2 officers first, then 2 more, and whatever remained of Naomi's composure finally cracked. She pushed back from the table so fast her chair scraped across the floor. "This is insanity." Her eyes cut to Nichole. "You ungrateful little—" The officer nearest her caught her wrist before she could finish. Metal clicked. Naomi stared down at the handcuffs as if they belonged to somebody else's ending. Then she started shouting. At Nichole, at Tristan, at Kane on the screen, at the room. Years of fury and entitlement and disbelief pouring out in one ugly stream as the officers pulled her toward the door. Jane didn't scream. That was somehow worse. She stood frozen for 1 second too long, every layer of that cultivated elegance falling away. When the officer touched her arm, she moved, but there was nothing graceful in it. No mask left, no cool detachment, just calculation ruined by timing, and a door closing behind her. When the room had emptied, Tristan stepped closer to Nichole. She was still in her father's chair, looking at the screen that had gone dark. Somewhere on the far end of the table, a board member reached for water with an unsteady hand. The room still smelled faintly of panic. He laid his hand over hers on the table. The gold ring caught the light. Still on his finger, still there. "You didn't tell me everything." His voice held irritation and admiration in equal measure and made no real effort to separate them. Nichole leaned back slightly and looked up at him, the smallest smile at her mouth. "You were the one who taught me not to." A look crossed his face that she might have called surrender. "Did I?" "You did." Her fingers turned under his until their hands fit more naturally together. "So tell me, Tristan Oswald." The smile sharpened just a little. "Are you ready to meet the real Mrs. Oswald?" For a second he only looked at her, then he lifted her hand and pressed his mouth to her knuckles, quietly, without announcement, as he did everything that actually mattered to him. The war for the company was over. The war between them had only just changed its name. The hospital room was quiet at that hour, the particular quiet of a building that had learned to function at half volume after midnight. Tristan was standing at the window with his back to the bed and his hands in his pockets, looking at the city below without really seeing it. The lights of Manhattan ran on without permission or apology, the same as always. Behind him, Lawrence shifted, and Tristan turned to find him awake. Kane looked smaller in the hospital bed than he'd ever looked anywhere else. He was still Kane, still the man who could silence a room by walking into it. But the IV line and the pallor and the way he breathed with deliberate effort made clear that the last several weeks had cost him. His eyes, though, were back. That was the thing that mattered. "You could have told me." Kane's voice had the texture of someone who'd been using it carefully all day. "I made a judgment call." He kept his voice even. Kane's jaw tightened. "You went around me, about my own daughter." Tristan didn't argue that. He came to the chair beside the bed and sat, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "I asked you to protect her." Kane's eyes didn't leave Tristan's face. "Keep her close, keep her out of the line of fire. That was the assignment, not this." Tristan looked at him. "I know." Kane's expression didn't shift. "Then explain it to me." Tristan leaned forward, forearms on his knees, and looked at his own hands for a second before he answered. Protecting her was the assignment. Loving her wasn't. He said it simply, without decoration. The marriage started as the fastest way to get her out of Naomi's reach. You know that. But somewhere between then and now... He stopped, eyes dropping to his hands. "She stopped being someone I was keeping safe and became someone I couldn't imagine not having. I don't know exactly when it happened. I know I didn't fight it hard enough." He looked up. "She's not that scared girl anymore, Kane. Maybe she never was. I was just the last one to see it." Kane was quiet for long enough that the machines filled the silence. Tristan's voice dropped. "She became something I wasn't prepared for. I don't know what else to tell you." The older man studied him, the careful, unhurried assessment of someone who had spent decades reading people across tables and knowing when a man was lying. Tristan met it without looking away. "You're as close to a son as I've got." Kane's voice came low and deliberate, and the words carried all their weight without any of their softness. "Which means, I know your history. I know what you do with women you don't intend to keep." He let that settle. "Nichole is not any of those women." "No." Tristan's voice was flat and final. "She's not." The gold ring caught the light when he shifted. Kane's eyes went to it, then back to his face. "If you hurt her," Kane's voice came low and without warning, "this bed won't stop me." Tristan met his eyes. "I know that too." Silence again. The machines kept their even rhythm. Outside, the city went on indifferently. Then Kane exhaled slowly, and something in his expression gave. Not much, but enough for Tristan to recognize it. Tristan leaned forward slightly. "She's not just your daughter now. She's mine too. And I'd burn down everything I've built before I'd let anything reach her again." Kane looked at him for one more long second. "Then get her home." His voice was final. "And don't ever make me have this conversation again." Tristan stood, straightened his jacket, and moved toward the door. At the threshold, he stopped. He didn't turn back. "Get some rest, Kane." The older man closed his eyes. The ghost of something that might have been satisfaction crossed his face. The months that followed moved with the particular momentum of things that had been in motion far longer than anyone knew. Naomi and Jane were charged, tried, and convicted: conspiracy to commit murder, corporate fraud, obstruction of justice, and a list of additional counts that filled 3 pages. Jane's relationship with Sam, which had never been a secret so much as a fact no one had examined closely enough, became Exhibit A in a case that the papers ran for weeks. Sam's own sentencing came separately. The Lawrence and Oswald enterprises formalized their partnership. Nichole took her seat beside her father at the head of the company, managed her own affairs with the particular authority of someone who had been underestimated once and declined to repeat the experience, and kept her medical routines with the calm precision of someone who had decided to take care of herself. The Hamptons estate had never looked like this. White light strung through the trees, flowers in arrangements someone had clearly agonized over, 100 chairs facing the water, and the sound of the ocean carrying across the lawn as the evening settled. The same dock, the same expanse of sand, the same house, lit from within, only everything different. Nichole stood just inside the entrance, her hand resting in the crook of her father's arm, wearing white, not the simple dress Tristan had chosen for her all those months ago, but something built for this: lace, a train that moved when she did, a neckline that the designer had called understated and Nichole had called exactly right. Kane looked down at her. He said nothing, which meant everything. The music changed and they walked. Every guest rose. Nichole was aware of it the way she was aware of her own pulse. Present, registered, not the thing she was paying attention to. She was paying attention to the man at the altar. Tristan stood in a dark suit, hands clasped in front of him, watching her come toward him with the focused, unguarded attention of someone who had stopped trying to look away. When she was close enough, one corner of his mouth moved and the dimple appeared. That rare, specific thing that was hers alone. Her chest pulled tight in the best possible way. Kane placed her hand in Tristan's, and before he stepped back, he gripped Tristan's forearm once. Brief, firm, the compressed language of men who didn't need many words. Tristan's fingers closed around hers. No fear in it, no strategy, just the weight of a decision freely made and kept. Later, when the guests had moved to the tables and the music had shifted into something slower, Nichole slipped away from the reception and found the pool. The water was lit from below, turning the surface that deep turquoise she knew differently now. She stood at the edge in her dress, looking down at her own reflection, the lace, the train, the bare shoulders, and felt no pull of panic, no old current of fear rising from below. Just water, just light, just a summer night that had somehow become the one she'd been moving toward. She heard him before she felt him. The quiet approach that was his, specifically, in any room or out of it. His hands found her waist from behind, drawing her back against him. His mouth came to rest near her hair, and she felt him breathe her in, slowly, as if he still couldn't quite believe the night had ended here. "Still, Nick?" she murmured. He turned her, slowly, until she was facing him. His thumb came under her chin, tilting her face up, as he had 100 times in the months between then and now. "You are my wife." The words came low and certain. "The love of my life. The person who walked into a boardroom full of people betting against her, and made them regret the bet." The corner of his mouth curved. "And yes, you will always be my Nick." She kissed him before he finished the sentence. Behind them, the water moved in the light, and the ocean kept its sound, and the party went on beyond the trees. But none of it was the thing that mattered. She wasn't running from anything. She hadn't been for a while now. She was exactly where she had chosen to be, with exactly the person she had chosen, and the arms around her felt the way they always had, like the one place in the world where nothing could reach her. She pressed closer. She wasn't going anywhere. Thank you for staying with Nichole and Tristan until the very end. Where in the world are you watching from? Please drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far this story has traveled. If this series moved you, if you felt every moment of tension, every stolen glance, every time Tristan said Nick and something shifted in your chest, hit that like button and subscribe. It means everything to me. Now I have to ask you something. Have you ever met someone you weren't supposed to want? Someone who was off limits, dangerous, completely wrong for you on paper, and yet the closer you got, the harder it became to breathe. Have you ever been protected by someone who refused to admit they loved you? Tell me in the comments, Team Tristan from the beginning, or did he have to earn it?